She was the lawyer who defended the billionaire CEO until she learned his victim was her sister. "You're representing him, aren't you?" Eleanor's voice trembled with disbelief. Vivian stood frozen in her sister's modest apartment, the flash drive heavy in her palm. "I didn't know it was you." "Of course you didn't," Eleanor laughed bitterly. "The great Vivian Blackwood, defender of the wealthy and powerful. You never bothered to know anything about me." "Eleanor." "He stole everything from me, Vivian. 3 years of my life's work, and now my own sister is going to help him get away with it." The truth hit Vivian like a physical blow. She had 2 choices: defend the billionaire who'd made her career, or stand up for the sister she'd abandoned long ago. Some decisions change everything. Before we dive deeper, ask yourself, if someone like Vivian could be hiding a truth this dark, how many other powerful people are? Subscribe now, because the next story like this might hit closer to home than you think. And if you won't, at least tell us why in the comments. Because staying silent says a lot. The courtroom fell silent as Vivian Blackwood rose from her seat. Her charcoal Armani suit was impeccable, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. The opposing counsel visibly tensed. Everyone knew what was coming. "Your Honor," Vivian began, her voice clear and measured. "The prosecution has presented what they believe is compelling evidence against my client. But what they've actually presented is a carefully constructed narrative built on circumstantial evidence and emotional appeals." She moved toward the jury, making deliberate eye contact with each member. "The prosecution wants you to see a villain. I'm asking you to see the facts." For the next 17 minutes, Vivian systematically dismantled the prosecution's case. She exposed inconsistencies in witness testimony, highlighted procedural errors in evidence collection, and presented alternative explanations that cast reasonable doubt on her client's guilt. By the time she returned to her seat, the energy in the courtroom had shifted. The jury members leaned forward, engaged. The prosecutor looked defeated. Vivian's client, a hedge fund manager accused of insider trading, squeezed her arm in gratitude. 3 hours later, the verdict came back. Not guilty on all counts. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around Vivian. Camera flashes illuminated her face as microphones thrust toward her. "Miss Blackwood, another victory. That makes 27 consecutive wins. How do you do it?" Vivian offered a practiced smile. "I simply ensure the facts are presented clearly. The truth speaks for itself. Critics say you manipulate the system to get guilty clients off. Your response? Everyone deserves a robust defense. Our justice system is built on that principle." Her voice remained steady, unperturbed. "Now, if you'll excuse me." Her driver opened the door to a sleek black Mercedes. As the car pulled away from the courthouse, Vivian's phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from colleagues and clients. She scrolled through them with detached interest, then set the phone aside and gazed out the window. The city skyline reflected her career. Towering, impressive, untouchable. At 40, Vivian Blackwood had become a legend in legal circles. The fixer, they called her. The attorney who could make even the most damning evidence disappear. Her client list included Fortune 500 CEOs, politicians, celebrities, and anyone else who could afford her astronomical fees. The car pulled up to her penthouse building. The doorman greeted her by name, and the elevator whisked her to the top floor. Inside her apartment, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city she'd conquered. Vivian kicked off her heels and poured herself a glass of 30-year-old scotch. The amber liquid caught the light as she raised it in a silent toast to another victory, another addition to her perfect record. The penthouse was immaculate, all clean lines, neutral tones, and carefully curated art. Everything in its place, everything controlled, just like her life. She moved to her home office and opened her laptop. 3 new case inquiries had arrived during the trial. All high profile, all lucrative, all from people who needed problems to disappear. This was Vivian's world, a realm of power, privilege, and moral flexibility. She had mastered the art of compartmentalization, separating legal ethics from personal ethics until the line between them blurred into non-existence. Her phone rang. The caller ID displayed Harrison Westbrook, the managing partner of Westbrook and Associates, where Vivian had been a senior partner for 12 years. "Harrison," she answered. I assume you've heard the verdict. Spectacular work as always, Vivian. His voice carried the polished tone of old money and Ivy League education. The client is ecstatic. The firm is ecstatic. The partners want to take you to dinner at the Capitol tomorrow to celebrate. I appreciate the offer, but I have preparations for the Donovan case next week. Harrison chuckled. All work and no play, Vivian. That's why you're the best. But there's something else I'd like to discuss. A new case has come in. High priority. The client specifically requested you. Vivian took a sip of scotch. I'm listening. Maxwell Reed. The name caught her attention. Maxwell Reed, founder and CEO of Nexus Innovations, one of the most valuable tech companies in the world. A visionary who had transformed artificial intelligence from science fiction into everyday reality. What's the situation? She asked. Intellectual property theft allegations. A former employee claims Reed stole her algorithm and is passing it off as his own. She's filed a lawsuit seeking damages in the hundreds of millions. Number 3. Interesting. Vivian moved to her desk, already making mental notes. Send me the preliminary documents. I'll review them tonight. They're already in your inbox. Reed wants to meet as soon as possible. He's concerned about the potential publicity. I'll look it over and let you know my thoughts in the morning. After hanging up, Vivian opened her email and downloaded the file. The plaintiff's name caught her eye. Eleanor Winters. Something about the name tugged at her memory, but she dismissed it. In a city of millions, coincidences happened. She continued scanning the documents, noting key details about the case. Eleanor Winters had worked at Nexus Innovations for 3 years as a lead programmer in their AI division. 6 months ago, she had been terminated. 2 weeks later, Nexus announced a breakthrough AI algorithm that, according to the lawsuit, bore striking similarities to Winters' work. Vivian's analytical mind began dissecting potential strategies. The case had merit on its surface, but with the right approach, they could win. A large corporation against a former employee. The power imbalance alone tilted the scales in their favor before they even entered a courtroom. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Miss Blackwood, Maxwell Reed here. Harrison shared your contact. Would appreciate discussing my case privately. Dinner tomorrow? The Meridian, 8 p.m. The Meridian was the most exclusive restaurant in the city, requiring reservations months in advance, unless you were Maxwell Reed, whose net worth exceeded $11 billion. Vivian texted back, Mr. Reed, I'll be there. Looking forward to discussing your case. She returned to the documents, reading more about Eleanor Winters. MIT graduate, specialization in machine learning, multiple patents before joining Nexus. Impressive credentials for someone Vivian had never heard of. The next evening, Vivian arrived at the Meridian precisely at 8. Her tailored charcoal suit projected the confidence and authority that had become her trademark. The maitre d' recognized her immediately. Miss Blackwood, Mr. Reed is waiting for you in the private dining room. She followed him through the main dining area, where conversations hushed briefly as diners recognized her. Vivian was accustomed to the attention. Her reputation preceded her everywhere she went. The private dining room was intimate, with a single table positioned near a window overlooking the city. Maxwell Reed rose as she entered. In person, he matched his public image, tall, fit, with salt and pepper hair and the confident bearing of a man accustomed to getting his way. Miss Blackwood, he extended his hand. A pleasure to finally meet the legendary fixer in person. Vivian shook his hand firmly. Mr. Reed, I've reviewed the preliminary documents. We have our work cut out for us. Reed's smile faltered slightly. Please, call me Max. And yes, this situation is unfortunate. But nothing someone of your caliber can't handle, I'm sure. They sat, and a sommelier appeared with a bottle of wine that Vivian recognized as a rare vintage worth thousands. Reed ordered for both of them without consulting her. A small power play, she noted, but didn't challenge. So, Reed began after the sommelier departed, what's your initial assessment? The plaintiff has constructed a compelling narrative. Vivian replied. The timing of her termination coinciding with your algorithm's unveiling creates an optics problem. But optics aren't evidence. Reed nodded. Eleanor Winters was a promising hire who ultimately couldn't deliver. The algorithm in question was developed by my team. She had minimal input, but is now claiming credit. And her termination? Corporate restructuring. We let go of 15 employees that quarter. She claims you threatened her when she confronted you about the algorithm. Reed's expression hardened momentarily before relaxing into practiced contrition. Miss Winters was emotional during her exit interview. She misinterpreted my words. I simply reminded her of her confidentiality agreement. Throughout dinner, Reed continued outlining his version of events. How Winters had been a mediocre programmer with an inflated sense of her contributions. How she had become vindictive after being terminated. How the lawsuit was nothing more than an attempt at extortion. Vivian listened carefully, noting not just what Reed said, but how he said it. The slight tension in his jaw when discussing certain topics. The calculated pauses before specific denials. The way his eyes never quite met hers when mentioning the algorithm's development timeline. By dessert, Vivian had formed her initial assessment. Reed was hiding something. But that didn't matter. Her job wasn't to judge his guilt or innocence. It was to win his case. I'll take the case, Vivian announced. My retainer is non-negotiable. $500,000 with additional billing at $800 per hour. Reed didn't blink. Consider it done. Whatever it takes to make this go away. As they parted ways outside the restaurant, Reed caught her arm. One more thing, Miss Blackwood. I need this handled quickly and quietly. The company is preparing for our biggest product launch yet. Negative publicity could cost us billions. Understood, Vivian replied coolly, disengaging from his grip. Discretion is part of what you're paying for. The following morning, Vivian assembled her team in the firm's largest conference room. 3 junior associates and 2 paralegals who would work exclusively on the Reed case. Jacob, I need a complete background check on Eleanor Winters. Education, employment history, financial situation, personal life, anything we can use. Jacob nodded, making notes. Melissa, analyze her technical expertise. I want to know if she had the capability to develop this algorithm independently. On it, Melissa replied. David, review all her communications with Nexus. Emails, texts, meeting notes, find inconsistencies in her claims. Yes, Miss Blackwood. Sarah and Michael, you'll handle document review. I want to know everything about Eleanor Winters by the end of the week. The team dispersed, and Vivian returned to her office. She had just settled at her desk when her assistant buzzed. Miss Blackwood, your mother is on line 1. Vivian frowned. Her mother rarely called during work hours. Put her through. Vivian, darling. Catherine Blackwood's voice carried the slight tremor of age. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. It's fine, Mom. Is everything okay at the retirement community? Oh, yes, everything here is fine. I'm calling about Eleanor. Have you spoken to her recently? Vivian froze, her hand tightening around the phone. Eleanor? Mom, I haven't spoken to Eleanor in years. You know that. I'm worried about her, Catherine continued. She hasn't returned my calls in weeks. It's not like her. A cold sensation spread through Vivian's chest. Mom, what's Eleanor's last name now? After the adoption? Winters, dear. Eleanor Winters. She kept our family name as her middle name. Eleanor Catherine Winters. The file on Vivian's desk seemed to pulse with sudden significance. Eleanor Winters. The plaintiff suing Maxwell Reed was her sister, the baby sister her parents had given up for adoption 28 years ago, when Vivian was 12. Mom, I have to go, Vivian said abruptly. I'll call you back. Hanging up, Vivian stared at the wall, memories flooding back. Eleanor had been an unexpected late-life pregnancy for her parents. With her father's business failing and her mother's health deteriorating, they had made the heartbreaking decision to place the baby for adoption. Vivian had never forgiven them, carrying the wound of her sister's absence throughout her adolescence. 15 years ago, Eleanor had found them. By then, Vivian was in law school, focused entirely on her career. Their reunion had been awkward, stilted. Vivian, unable to process the complicated emotions, had kept her distance, maintaining only sporadic contact over the years. Their last conversation had been a brief, perfunctory birthday call nearly 2 years ago. And now, by some cosmic joke, Eleanor was the plaintiff in her newest case, the woman Maxwell Reed had allegedly wronged. Vivian pulled Eleanor's file from the stack her team had compiled. The photograph confirmed what she already knew. The plaintiff was indeed her sister. Eleanor's resume was impressive. MIT graduate, specialization in machine learning, multiple patents to her name before joining Nexus Innovations. According to the file, Eleanor had worked at Nexus for 3 years, leading a small team developing advanced AI algorithms. 6 months ago, she had been terminated. 2 weeks later, Nexus announced a revolutionary AI system that bore striking similarities to Eleanor's documented work. If you felt that drop in your stomach just now, that's your conscience reacting. Don't just feel it and scroll away. Hit subscribe. Because too many people ignore stories like this until they're living one. And if you won't, comment below and tell us what made you turn away. We'll wait. Vivian's hands trembled as she closed the file. She had 2 options: recuse herself from the case due to conflict of interest, or continue representing Reed without disclosing her relationship to the plaintiff. The ethical choice was clear, but something held her back, a need to understand what had really happened between her sister and Maxwell Reed. That evening, Vivian drove to an address in the unfashionable east side of the city. Eleanor's apartment building was modest, but well-maintained, a far cry from the luxury condominiums where Vivian's usual clients resided. She hesitated before knocking, suddenly aware of how strange this would appear. After years of minimal contact, she was showing up unannounced at her sister's door, while representing the man Eleanor was suing. The door opened to reveal Eleanor, thinner than Vivian remembered, dark circles under her eyes. Recognition, followed by confusion, crossed her face. "Vivian, what are you doing here?" "May I come in?" Vivian asked, her professional composure momentarily abandoned. Eleanor stepped aside wordlessly. The apartment was small but tidy, filled with books and plants. A whiteboard covered in complex equations dominated one wall. "I just found out," Vivian began awkwardly, "about your lawsuit against Maxwell Reed." Eleanor's expression hardened. "How did you understanding?" dawned in her eyes. "You're representing him, aren't you?" Vivian nodded, unable to deny it. "Of course you are," Eleanor laughed bitterly. "The great Vivian Blackwood, defender of the wealthy and powerful. Why am I not surprised?" "I didn't know it was you," Vivian said defensively. "I just discovered the connection today." "And now what? You've come to convince me to drop the case? Offer me a settlement?" Eleanor crossed her arms. "Or maybe you're here to gather intelligence for your client?" "I came because you're my sister," Vivian replied, the word feeling strange on her tongue after so many years of distance. Eleanor's laugh was hollow. "Sister? Is that what we are?" "We share DNA, Vivian, but we've never been sisters. Not really." The truth of the statement stung. "I know, I've been absent, but that doesn't mean I don't care." "Care?" Eleanor's voice rose. "If you cared, you might have called more than once every few years. You might have visited when I graduated from MIT, or when I got my first patent. You might have been there when I needed family." Vivian had no defense against these accusations. "You're right. I've been a terrible sister, but I'm here now, and I need to understand what happened between you and Reed." Eleanor studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her sincerity. Finally, she walked to a desk and retrieved a flash drive. "Everything's here," she said, holding it out. "My original code, documentation of my work, emails with Reed, recordings of meetings where I presented my findings. He stole 3 years of my life's work, Vivian. He took my algorithm, fired me, and is now marketing it as his own creation." Vivian took the flash drive, its small weight suddenly significant. "Why didn't you go to the press?" "I signed an NDA," Eleanor replied. "And Reed made it clear what would happen if I violated it. He has resources I can't match, connections I don't have. The lawsuit is my only recourse." "And your lawyer? Who's representing you?" "Marcus Daniels. Small firm, but he believes in my case." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "He's not you, of course. Doesn't have your resources or reputation. But he has something you seem to lack. Integrity." The barb landed precisely as intended. Vivian pocketed the flash drive. "I'll review this. If what you're saying is true—" "It is true," Eleanor interrupted. "But will that matter to you? Your career is built on defending people like Reed, wealthy, powerful men who believe rules don't apply to them." Vivian had no answer. She had never questioned the morality of her work before, viewing it simply as the application of legal expertise to those who could afford it. But facing her sister, the sister she had failed in so many ways, forced a reckoning she wasn't prepared for. I should go, Vivian said finally. Thank you for seeing me. At the door, Eleanor called after her. What will you do now, Vivian? Recuse yourself? Or will you help him destroy me? Vivian turned back. I don't know yet, but I promise you this, I will find the truth. Back in her penthouse, Vivian connected Eleanor's flash drive to her laptop. Hours passed as she reviewed the contents. Meticulous documentation of Eleanor's work, the evolution of her algorithm, meeting notes, and most damning of all, recordings of conversations with Reed where he acknowledged her contributions. In one recording, Reed's voice was unmistakable. Eleanor, what you've developed here is revolutionary. This adaptive learning protocol could transform our entire product line. Another file contained email exchanges where Reed referred to Eleanor's algorithm and discussed implementation strategies with his executive team. The evidence was overwhelming. Maxwell Reed had indeed stolen Eleanor's work, firing her when she confronted him about it. The lawsuit wasn't frivolous, it was justified. Vivian poured herself a glass of scotch, her hands unsteady. For the first time in her career, she faced a moral dilemma that transcended legal strategy. She could continue representing Reed, using her skills to discredit her own sister and help a thief escape justice. Or she could walk away from the case, potentially damaging her perfect record and reputation. There was a third option, of course, one that would require courage she wasn't sure she possessed. Sleep eluded her that night. Vivian tossed in her king-size bed, memories surfacing that she'd long suppressed. Eleanor, as a newborn, tiny and perfect in their mother's arms. The day her parents told her they were giving the baby up for adoption. The emptiness in the house afterward. The way her mother cried at night when she thought no one could hear. Then, later memories. The awkward reunion 15 years ago. Eleanor, 23 and brilliant, trying to connect with the family that had given her away. Vivian, keeping her distance, unable to process the complicated emotions her sister's presence evoked. Had she been jealous, afraid, or simply too focused on her career to make room for family complications? Whatever the reason, she had failed Eleanor then, and now she was poised to fail her again in a far more devastating way. Morning found Vivian at her desk, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. She called Harrison Westbrook's office and requested an urgent meeting. An hour later, she sat across from him in his opulent office. The managing partner studied her with concern. You look terrible, Vivian. Is everything all right? I need to discuss the Reed case, she began. There's a complication. What kind of complication? The plaintiff, Eleanor Winters. She's my sister. Westbrook's expression remained impassive, but his eyes sharpened. I wasn't aware you had a sister. She was given up for adoption when I was 12. We reconnected briefly years ago, but haven't been close. Vivian took a deep breath. I discovered the connection yesterday. It's a clear conflict of interest. I see. Westbrook leaned back in his chair. This is unfortunate timing. The firm has already accepted Reed's retainer. I'm recusing myself from the case, Vivian stated firmly. Conflict of interest. Of course. Westbrook nodded. I'll assign Johnson to take over. He's not you, but he's competent. Vivian took a deep breath. There's more. I've reviewed evidence that suggests the plaintiff's claims have merit. Reed did steal her algorithm. Westbrook's expression didn't change. That's for the courts to decide, Vivian. Our job is to represent our client zealously within the bounds of the law. I'm considering representing Eleanor Winters. Now Westbrook's composure cracked. You can't be serious. That would be a direct conflict with the firm's interests. Only if I remain with the firm, Vivian replied quietly. Understanding dawned in Westbrook's eyes. You're willing to throw away 15 years with this firm for a sister you barely know? For a case against a client who could bring us millions in future business? I'm willing to do what's right, Vivian said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. For once. Westbrook leaned back, studying her. You realize what this means. If you leave to represent the plaintiff against our client, we will view it as a hostile action. Your partnership will be dissolved. Your equity stake, your client relationships, all forfeit. I understand. Sleep on it, Westbrook advised. Don't make a decision you'll regret. But Vivian had already decided. That afternoon, she drafted her resignation letter, effective immediately. By evening, she had cleared her office, 15 years of career achievement packed into 3 cardboard boxes. As she placed the boxes in her car, her phone rang. Maxwell Reed. "I just heard from Westbrook." Reed's voice was cold. "He says you're recusing yourself due to a conflict. Care to explain?" "The plaintiff is my sister," Vivian stated simply. A long pause followed. "I see. An unfortunate coincidence. Westbrook assures me Johnson will handle the case with equal skill." "Mr. Reed," Vivian said carefully, "I've reviewed evidence that suggests the plaintiff's claims have merit. I strongly advise you to consider settlement." Reed's laugh was chilling. "Is that a threat, Miss Blackwood? Because it sounds like you're violating attorney-client privilege." "It's free advice," Vivian replied. "Take it or leave it." "I made you, Vivian." Reed's voice hardened. "Your reputation was built on cases I sent your way. I can unmake you just as easily." "Goodbye, Mr. Reed." Vivian drove directly to Eleanor's apartment. When her sister opened the door, surprise registered on her face. "I resigned from Westbrook," Vivian announced without preamble. "I'm no longer representing Reed." Eleanor's expression remained guarded. "Why?" "Because you're my sister," Vivian said simply. "And because he's guilty." Eleanor studied her for a long moment. "What happens now?" "That depends," Vivian replied. "Your lawyer, Marcus Daniels, is he any good?" A small smile tugged at Eleanor's lips. "He's dedicated, passionate, but he's never faced someone like Reed before." "Would he consider bringing on co-counsel?" Eleanor's eyes widened. You want to represent me? Against Reed and your former firm?" "If you'll have me." Vivian nodded. "It won't be easy. Reed will fight dirty. Westbrook will assign their best attorneys. My reputation in legal circles will work against us initially." "Why would you do this?" Eleanor asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "You're throwing away your career." "Not throwing it away," Vivian corrected. "Redirecting it. And as for why..." She hesitated. Emotions she had suppressed for years, rising to the surface. "Because I failed you once before. When our parents gave you up, I was old enough to understand, but too young to stop it. I've carried that guilt my entire life, keeping my distance because facing you meant facing my own failure." Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. "You were a child, Vivian. It wasn't your fault." "Maybe not," Vivian acknowledged. "But what came after was my choice. I chose career over family. I chose distance over connection. I won't make that mistake again." Eleanor wiped her eyes, considering. "Reed is powerful. He has resources we can't match." "He has money," Vivian corrected. "We have the truth. And now you have me." For the first time since Vivian's arrival, Eleanor's expression softened. The great Vivian Blackwood, fighting for the underdog. Who would have thought? "Not me," Vivian admitted with a small smile, "but it feels right." Vivian finally chose a side. Question is, would you have? Subscribe now before you forget this moment, because stories like this aren't just entertainment, they're reminders. And if you're one of those who still won't subscribe, type in the comments what kind of person can watch this and feel nothing. That night, the sisters talked until dawn, not just about the case, but about the years of separation, the pain of absence, the lives they had built apart from each other. Wounds began to heal as understanding grew between them. "I always wondered why you kept your distance after we found each other," Eleanor said softly. "I thought maybe you were ashamed of me." Vivian shook her head. "Never. I was ashamed of myself, of our parents, of the decision that was made, and I didn't know how to face that shame. And now I'm facing it. Finally." The following week, Vivian met with Marcus Daniels, a passionate attorney whose small practice focused on employee rights. His office was a stark contrast to Westbrook and Associates, modest, functional, without the ostentatious displays of wealth that characterized corporate law firms. Daniels regarded Vivian with undisguised suspicion. "Miss Blackwood, your reputation precedes you, but I have to ask, why the sudden change of heart? Why switch sides?" "Family comes first," Vivian replied simply, "and justice matters." Daniels wasn't convinced. "You've spent your career helping the powerful evade consequences. Forgive me if I'm skeptical about your sudden moral awakening." "Your skepticism is warranted," Vivian acknowledged. "But I'm not asking you to trust my motives. I'm asking you to use my expertise." I know how Reed's team will attack this case because I would have designed those attacks myself. Gradually, Daniels warmed to the idea of partnership as Vivian outlined strategies to counter Reed's inevitable tactics. He'll try to bury us in paperwork, Vivian explained. Delay tactics, procedural objections, endless depositions, standard playbook for wealthy defendants. How do we fight that? Marcus asked. We change the battlefield, Vivian replied. We take this public. Eleanor looked alarmed. My NDA has exceptions, Vivian finished, including legal proceedings. We'll be careful, but strategic publicity will pressure Reed where he's most vulnerable, his public image. The case quickly became David versus Goliath in the public eye. Technology blogs picked up the story first, with headlines like, Former Nexus engineer claims CEO stole her AI algorithm. Mainstream media followed, particularly after learning about Vivian's dramatic career change to represent her estranged sister. Tech billionaire accused of stealing female engineers' work made front-page news, with additional interest generated by the personal angle of the story. Reed responded predictably, first with a smear campaign against Eleanor, painting her as incompetent and opportunistic, then with legal maneuvers designed to drain their resources. Westbrook and Associates assigned 3 senior partners to the case, filing motion after motion to dismiss. The system protects power unless people like you pay attention. Subscribing might seem small, but it keeps stories like this alive. If you stay quiet, you're helping the silence win. Prove you're not part of that subscribe, or explain in the comments why you're okay watching justice get buried. Through it all, Vivian and Eleanor stood firm, their sisterly bond strengthening under pressure. When Reed's team leaked Eleanor's college medical records showing therapy for anxiety, attempting to portray her as mentally unstable, Vivian held her sister as she cried, then crafted a response that turned the invasion of privacy into a public relations disaster for Reed. They're trying to shame you for seeking help, Vivian told Eleanor. We're going to show the world how desperate and unethical that is. Their press statement was measured but devastating. When powerful men can't attack the facts, they attack the person. Mr. Reed's decision to violate Victimℹ. Winter's medical privacy demonstrates the lengths he will go to avoid addressing the actual evidence in this case. The public backlash was immediate. Tech industry leaders condemned the tactic. Women in STEM rallied around Eleanor. Stand with Eleanor began trending on social media. But the legal battle remained uphill. Vivian had liquidated investments to fund their fight, but Reed's resources seemed limitless. Westbrook and Associates filed motion after motion, each requiring extensive responses that drained time and money. They're trying to exhaust us, Marcus observed one night as the 3 of them worked late in his office. It's working, Eleanor admitted. I'm exhausted. Vivian squeezed her sister's hand. That's their strategy. They want us to settle for pennies just to make this end. Maybe we should, Eleanor said quietly. This is consuming our lives. No, Vivian's voice was firm. Reed needs to be held accountable. Not just for you, but for everyone else he's done this to. You think there are others? Marcus asked. People like Reed don't steal just once, Vivian replied. Success emboldens them. Her words proved prophetic. As the case gained publicity, other former Nexus employees began reaching out. Engineers and programmers with similar stories of having their work appropriated without credit or compensation. None had Eleanor's documentation, but their testimonies formed a pattern that strengthened her case. Technical experts analyzed the algorithm, confirming Eleanor's authorship based on coding style and methodology. Reed's carefully constructed image began to crumble. Investors grew nervous. Nexus stock fluctuated with each new development in the case. Then came the breakthrough. A whistleblower from within Nexus provided emails between Reed and his executive team, explicitly discussing how to appropriate Eleanor's work while minimizing legal exposure. Eleanor's algorithm is the foundation of the new system, Reed had written. But we need to obscure that connection, restructure the code enough to claim independent development, then terminate her before the announcement. The night after receiving this evidence, Vivian received a call from Harrison Westbrook himself. Reed wants to settle, he said without preamble. $20 million, non-disclosure agreement, no admission of wrongdoing. Not enough, Vivian replied calmly. We want $50 million, public acknowledgement of Eleanor's contribution, and her name on the patent. That's ridiculous, Westbrook scoffed. Reed will never agree. Then we'll see him in court, Vivian said, with our new evidence. 2 days later, Westbrook called back. Reed had agreed to $40 million, acknowledgement of Eleanor's work, and shared patent rights. The case was over. In Eleanor's apartment, the sisters celebrated with cheap champagne, laughing as they toasted their victory with mismatched mugs. To justice, Eleanor said, raising her mug. To new beginnings, Vivian added. What will you do now? Eleanor asked, as the celebration quieted. Your old firm won't take you back. Vivian smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. I'm thinking of starting my own practice. Focus on intellectual property rights, employee advocacy, cases that matter. Sounds like you'll need a technical consultant, Eleanor mused. Someone who understands complex algorithms. Know anyone qualified? Vivian asked with a grin. Eleanor raised her mug. To new beginnings, professional and personal. To family, Vivian added softly, the one we choose to build. As they clinked their makeshift champagne glasses, Vivian realized that in losing her carefully constructed career, she had found something far more valuable, her sister, her conscience, and a path forward that finally felt authentic. The following morning, as dawn broke over the city, Vivian began drafting plans for Blackwood and Winters, a new kind of law firm built on principles rather than profit. The journey ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in her life, Vivian wasn't walking it alone. She glanced at her phone as it buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Coffee and strategy session at 10? I have ideas for the firm logo. Vivian smiled and replied, Perfect. Bring your appetite. I'm making breakfast. As she set her phone down, Vivian noticed an email notification from a journalist requesting an interview about her career change. The subject line read, From defender of the powerful to champion of the wronged, your story. Her story. For so long, Vivian's story had been about winning at all costs, about climbing to the top regardless of who got stepped on along the way. Now she was writing a different narrative, one of redemption, of choosing right over easy, of reconnecting with the sister she had abandoned. The transition wouldn't be smooth. Already, former colleagues were distancing themselves. Former clients were canceling meetings. The legal community was buzzing with speculation about her breakdown or midlife crisis. No one believed that Vivian Blackwood, the fixer, had simply found her conscience. But for every door that closed, new ones were opening. Marcus Daniels had offered to share his office space until they found their own. 3 of the former Nexus employees who had come forward during Eleanor's case had reached out about potential intellectual property claims. A women's tech collective had invited Eleanor to speak about her experience, with Vivian joining to discuss legal protections for innovators. There was a knock at her door. Vivian checked the time. Too early for Eleanor. She opened the door to find a courier with a large envelope. Vivian Blackwood? The courier asked. Yes. Package from Maxwell Reed. Vivian accepted the envelope warily. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter on Nexus Innovations letterhead. Miss Blackwood, it read, While our recent interactions have been adversarial, I've always respected your intelligence and determination. Those qualities were simply directed against me rather than for me this time. I underestimated both you and your sister. A rare miscalculation on my part. I don't make the same mistake twice. Consider this a warning. Your new venture will be watched closely. Choose your battles wisely. M.R. Vivian folded the letter and placed it in her desk drawer. Reed's threat was clear, but it didn't frighten her. She had faced down one of the most powerful men in the tech industry and won. Whatever came next, she would handle it, with her sister by her side. When Eleanor arrived 2 hours later, Vivian had prepared a feast: pancakes, fresh fruit, coffee, and orange juice. The sisters sat at Vivian's dining table, laptops open, planning their future. I've been thinking about our focus, Eleanor said, sipping her coffee. There are so many cases like mine. People whose intellectual property has been stolen by corporations they worked for. Especially in tech, Vivian agreed. The power imbalance is extreme. Exactly. And most people don't have the resources to fight back. Or the evidence, Vivian added. You were exceptional in documenting everything. Eleanor smiled. Paranoia has its benefits, but most people aren't that careful. Which is why we need to educate them. Vivian said, excitement building, workshops for tech workers on protecting their intellectual property, seminars on documentation, legal clinics for those who can't afford representation. A holistic approach, Eleanor nodded. Not just litigation, but prevention and education. As they continued brainstorming, Vivian felt a sense of purpose she had never experienced at Westbrook and Associates. There, success was measured in billable hours and victory at all costs. Here, success would mean actually helping people, making a difference in their lives. "Oh, I almost forgot," Eleanor said, reaching into her bag. "I brought something for you." She handed Vivian a small wrapped package. Inside was a framed photograph, a baby Eleanor in their mother's arms, with 12-year-old Vivian standing beside them, looking down at her baby sister with wonder. "Mom sent it to me years ago," Eleanor explained. "I thought you might want it for your new office." Vivian traced the image with her finger, emotion tightening her throat. "I remember this day. You were just a week old. I was so excited to have a sister. And now you do," Eleanor said softly. "Again." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Vivian and Eleanor secured a modest office space, recruited a small staff, and launched Blackwood and Winters with a clear mission: to protect innovators from corporate theft and exploitation. Their first clients were former Nexus employees, emboldened by Eleanor's victory. Then came referrals, engineers, programmers, designers, all with similar stories of having their work appropriated without proper credit or compensation. Not every case was winnable. Not every potential client had Eleanor's meticulous documentation. But Vivian approached each situation with the same determination and strategic thinking that had made her the fixer. Only now, she was fixing injustice rather than helping the powerful escape it. 3 months after founding their firm, Vivian received an unexpected visitor. She looked up from her desk to see Harrison Westbrook standing in her office doorway. "Harrison," she said, surprised. "This is unexpected." "I was in the neighborhood," he replied, glancing around her modest office with barely concealed disdain. "Quite a step down from your corner office at Westbrook." "Depends on your perspective," Vivian gestured to a chair. "What can I do for you?" Westbrook sat, adjusting his bespoke suit. "I've been following your progress. You've made quite a splash in certain circles. We're doing good work." "Yes. Well, that's actually why I'm here." Westbrook leaned forward. "One of our clients is concerned about a potential case you've taken on. Artemis Technologies." Vivian kept her expression neutral. Artemis Technologies was a pharmaceutical giant currently being sued by a former researcher who claimed the company had stolen his cancer treatment protocol. "What about it?" "The client would prefer this matter be resolved quietly. They're prepared to offer a generous settlement." "To whom? My client or your firm?" Westbrook's smile tightened. "Both, potentially. $5 million to your client, a consulting contract for you personally, $1 million per year, minimal obligations." "A bribe, in other words." "A mutually beneficial arrangement," Westbrook corrected. "You were always pragmatic, Vivian. This crusade of yours is admirable, but surely you miss certain comforts." Vivian stood. "Thank you for stopping by, Harrison. Please tell Artemis that my client's initial settlement demand stands. $50 million, full credit for the protocol, and a public apology." Westbrook sighed as he rose. "I had hoped you might be reasonable. This path you've chosen, it won't end well. You're making powerful enemies." "I'm making a difference," Vivian replied. "Something I never did at Westbrook." After he left, Eleanor entered the office. "Was that Harrison Westbrook I just saw leaving?" "Yes. Apparently we've become concerning enough that they're trying to buy us off." Eleanor sat in the chair Westbrook had vacated. "Are we in trouble?" "No," Vivian smiled. "We're making progress." 6 months after founding Blackwood and Winters, the firm had grown to include 5 attorneys and a support staff of 10. They had won 3 significant cases and settled 5 others favorably. Their reputation was growing, not as the most powerful firm or the most profitable, but as the most principled. One evening, as Vivian was preparing to leave the office, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Catherine Blackwood. "Mom?" Vivian answered. "How are you?" "I'm well, dear. I just wanted to tell you that I saw your interview in the Times. About your new firm. Oh? What did you think? There was a pause. I'm proud of you, Vivian. Of both my daughters. What you're doing together. It's important work. Vivian felt a lump in her throat. Thank you, Mom. That means a lot. I've been thinking, Catherine continued, about when we gave Eleanor up. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I've regretted it every day since. Mom, you don't have to. No, I need to say this. We thought we were doing what was best for her. Your father's business was failing. My health was poor. We convinced ourselves she would have a better life with another family. Catherine's voice broke. But we were wrong. We should have found a way to keep our family together. Vivian closed her eyes, memories washing over her. I was so angry with you and Dad. For years. I know, sweetheart. You had every right to be. But now I understand better. How complicated life can be. How sometimes there are no perfect choices. The important thing, Catherine said, is that you and Eleanor found each other again. You're rebuilding what was broken. That's a gift I never thought we'd have. After hanging up, Vivian sat in her darkened office, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From the ambitious young attorney who cared only about winning, to the woman who had sacrificed her career to stand by her sister. From the fixer who helped the powerful escape consequences, to the advocate who held them accountable. The transformation hadn't been easy. There were still moments when she missed her old life, the prestige, the luxury, the simplicity of not questioning the morality of her work. But those moments were growing rarer. Her phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Dinner at my place tonight? Marcus and the team are coming over to celebrate the Artemis settlement. Vivian smiled and replied, wouldn't miss it. As she gathered her things to leave, Vivian glanced at the framed photograph on her desk. Baby Eleanor and 12-year-old Vivian, the beginning of a sisterhood interrupted but ultimately reclaimed. Beside it stood a newer photo, Vivian and Eleanor at the opening of their firm, arms around each other, smiling with the confidence of women who had faced down a giant and won. 1 year after the Reed case, Blackwood and Winters had established itself as a formidable presence in intellectual property law. They had expanded to a larger office, hired additional staff, and taken on increasingly high-profile cases. Maxwell Reed had made good on his implied threat, using his influence to create obstacles for the firm. Potential clients were warned away. Witnesses were pressured to remain silent. Resources were mysteriously withdrawn. But for every door Reed closed, Vivian and Eleanor found another way forward. Their reputation for integrity and results spoke louder than Reed's whisper campaign. Their willingness to take on cases other firms wouldn't touch earned them loyal clients and dedicated allies. On the anniversary of their victory against Reed, the sisters met for dinner at the Meridian, the same exclusive restaurant where Vivian had first met with Reed to discuss his case. Quite a statement, choosing this place, Eleanor observed as they were seated. I thought it fitting, Vivian replied. A reminder of how far we've come. They ordered champagne, and when it arrived, Vivian raised her glass to 1 year of Blackwood and Winters. To family, Eleanor added, the one we chose to build. As they clinked glasses, Vivian reflected on the transformation of her life. She had lost her partnership at a prestigious firm, her luxury penthouse, her reputation as an undefeated attorney. But she had gained something far more valuable, a sister, a purpose, and the knowledge that she was finally using her talents for good. Any regrets? Eleanor asked, as if reading her thoughts. Vivian considered the question. None, she said finally. For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Outside the restaurant, the city lights glittered against the night sky. Somewhere in that skyline was the Nexus Innovations Tower, where Maxwell Reed continued building his empire. Somewhere else was the Westbrook and Associates building, where Vivian's former colleagues continued defending the powerful. But here, in this moment, were two sisters who had found their way back to each other against all odds, who had faced down power and privilege with nothing but truth on their side, who had built something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal and separation. You know, Eleanor said as they walked to their cars, when I first found our family 15 years ago, all I wanted was to belong somewhere, to understand where I came from. And now? Vivian asked. Eleanor smiled. Now I know that belonging isn't about where you came from. It's about who stands beside you when it matters most. Vivian squeezed her sister's hand. I'll always stand beside you. I promise. As they parted ways that night, Vivian felt a sense of peace she had never known in her years as the fixer. Her perfect record was gone, replaced by something far more valuable. A perfect purpose. The next morning, she arrived at the office early to find a package waiting on her desk. Inside was a newspaper clipping, an article about a new class action lawsuit against Nexus Innovations, alleging systematic intellectual property theft. Attached was a note in Eleanor's handwriting. Vivian smiled and reached for her phone. Some battles were worth fighting, no matter the cost, especially when you weren't fighting alone. You just witnessed redemption. Don't click away like it didn't move you. Subscribe. Not for us, but for yourself. Be part of the few who still care about right and wrong. And if you think that's too much to ask, say so in the comments. Let's see how many still think silence is strength. 1 year later, Vivian stood at the podium accepting the Women in Law Achievement Award. The audience, filled with attorneys, judges, and legal professionals, listened attentively as she spoke. When I left corporate law to start Blackwood and Winters with my sister, many people thought I was having a breakdown, she began, earning knowing laughter from the crowd. The truth is, I was having a breakthrough. For years, I measured success by victories in court and billable hours. I never stopped to ask whether I was using my skills for justice or merely for profit. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. The law is a powerful tool. It can protect the vulnerable or shield the powerful from consequences. It can right wrongs or perpetuate them. The choice of how we use that tool defines us as attorneys and as human beings. In the front row, Eleanor watched with pride as her sister continued. Our firm has a simple mission: to ensure that innovation is protected, that creators receive proper credit and compensation for their work, and that powerful entities cannot steal with impunity. It's not the easiest path in law, but it is the most rewarding. As applause filled the room, Vivian caught Eleanor's eye and smiled. From estranged siblings to powerful allies, their journey had transformed not just their own lives, but the lives of countless others who now had champions in their corner. Outside the venue, a reporter approached Vivian. Miss Blackwood, some say your firm's success is merely a personal vendetta against Maxwell Reed. How do you respond? Vivian smiled. Our firm has represented clients against dozens of companies, not just Nexus Innovations. This isn't about one man or one company. It's about a system that too often allows the powerful to exploit the brilliant minds who actually create innovation. No regrets about leaving Westbrook and Associates? None, Vivian replied without hesitation. Sometimes the most valuable things in life are found only after you let go of what you thought you wanted. As the reporter walked away, Eleanor joined her sister. Nice answer. It's the truth, Vivian said. I spent 15 years chasing the wrong kind of success. Better late than never, Eleanor replied, linking her arm through Vivian's. Ready to go? The team is waiting to celebrate. As they walked toward the car, Vivian reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them to this moment. If she hadn't been assigned the Reed case, if her mother hadn't called that day, if she hadn't found the courage to walk away from everything she had built, none of this would exist. Sometimes, the hardest choices led to the greatest rewards. Sometimes, what seemed like an ending was actually a beginning. And sometimes, the family you were born into became the family you chose, stronger for having been broken and rebuilt. You know, Vivian said as they drove away, when people ask me about my greatest achievement, they expect me to name a famous case or a legal victory. But it's not, Eleanor guessed. No, Vivian smiled. It's this, us, finding our way back to each other, building something meaningful together. Eleanor reached over and squeezed her sister's hand. From strangers to sisters. From adversaries to allies, Vivian added. The city lights blurred around them as they drove toward the celebration waiting ahead, not just of an award, but of a journey that had transformed 2 lives and countless others. A journey that had begun with a difficult choice and a flash drive that changed everything. In the end, Vivian hadn't just defended her sister, she had found herself. Don't just leave inspired, act. Hit that subscribe button, because stories like this disappear fast, and the next one will be darker, deeper, and closer than you expect. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Blackwood and Winter's conference room as Vivian reviewed their newest case. 2 years had passed since she'd walked away from Westbrook & Associates. 2 years of building something she could truly be proud of. The firm now occupied an entire floor in a downtown building, not as opulent as Westbrook's offices, but spacious and welcoming. Photos of their team lined one wall, alongside framed news articles documenting their most significant victories. At the center hung their mission statement: justice for innovators, accountability for all. Eleanor entered, carrying 2 coffee cups. "You're here early," she observed, setting one cup beside Vivian. "Couldn't sleep. The Horizon Biotech case is keeping me up." Eleanor nodded in understanding. Horizon Biotech, a pharmaceutical giant, was being sued by a former researcher who claimed the company had stolen her breakthrough cancer treatment. The case bore striking similarities to Eleanor's fight against Reed, but with potentially greater stakes. The treatment could save thousands of lives if properly developed and distributed. "Any word from our whistleblower?" Eleanor asked. "Not yet. He's scared, and I don't blame him. Horizon has even more resources than Nexus did." The door opened, and Marcus Daniels entered. Over the past 2 years, he had become an integral part of their team, bringing his passion for employee rights to complement Vivian's strategic brilliance and Eleanor's technical expertise. "Morning," he greeted them. "I just got a call from Westbrook." Vivian looked up sharply. "Harrison Westbrook?" Marcus nodded. "He wants to meet. Says it's about Horizon." "Interesting," Vivian mused. "Westbrook doesn't represent Horizon, as far as I know." "Maybe they're bringing him in specifically to deal with us," Eleanor suggested, "given your history." "Only one way to find out," Vivian decided. "Tell him I'll meet him. Neutral ground, the cafe across from the courthouse." 2 hours later, Vivian sat across from her former mentor. Harrison Westbrook looked older than she remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper, his hair grayer. "Thank you for meeting me," he began, his tone formal but not unfriendly. "I was intrigued by your call," Vivian replied. "What's your interest in the Horizon case?" Westbrook glanced around before leaning forward. "I'm not here on behalf of Horizon. This is personal." Vivian raised an eyebrow, waiting. "I've been watching your firm's work," Westbrook continued. "You've built something impressive, Vivian. Something meaningful." "Thank you," she replied cautiously, "but I doubt you asked to meet just to compliment our firm." Westbrook smiled faintly, direct as always. "No, I'm here because I have information about Horizon that might help your case." Now Vivian was genuinely surprised. "Why would you help us?" Westbrook was silent for a moment, seemingly weighing his words. "I've been at Westbrook & Associates for 35 years, built it from a small practice to what it is today, represented some of the most powerful people and corporations in the country." He paused, looking down at his coffee. "And lately, I've been wondering what it all amounts to. What legacy I'm leaving behind." "A crisis of conscience?" Vivian asked, not unkindly. "Perhaps," Westbrook acknowledged, "or maybe just the perspective that comes with age, watching you walk away from everything you'd built to do what you believed was right. It made an impression, Vivian. More than I admitted at the time." He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a flash drive, an echo of the one Eleanor had given Vivian 2 years earlier. "Horizon approached our firm 6 months ago. They wanted us to handle a potential intellectual property dispute. During our due diligence, we discovered some troubling information. Internal communications suggesting they were well aware that Dr. Lydia Chen developed the treatment they're now claiming as their own." Vivian stared at the flash drive. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because Dr. Chen's treatment could save lives, thousands of them. And because Horizon plans to price it so high that most patients won't be able to afford it." Westbrook pushed the drive across the table. "Sometimes, doing the right thing matters more than client confidentiality." "You could be disbarred for this," Vivian said quietly. "I'm retiring next month," Westbrook replied with a small smile. 35 years is enough. Time to make room for the next generation, preferably one with a stronger moral compass than mine." As Vivian reached for the drive, Westbrook added, "There's something else you should know. Maxwell Reed, sits on Horizon's board. He's been particularly vocal about fighting this case by any means necessary. Read again, Vivian murmured. Some enemies never go away. Be careful, Vivian. Reed hasn't forgotten what you and your sister did to him. This isn't just business for him. It's personal. Back at the office, Vivian shared the unexpected development with Eleanor and Marcus. Can we trust him? Eleanor asked skeptically. This could be a trap. It could be, Vivian acknowledged, but my instinct says he's genuine. Westbrook has many flaws, but he's never been deliberately deceptive. They connected the flash drive to a secure computer and began reviewing its contents. The evidence was damning. Emails, research notes, and meeting minutes clearly showing that Horizon executives knew Dr. Chen had developed the treatment independently and had systematically worked to push her out while appropriating her research. This is even worse than what Reed did to you, Marcus observed, looking at Eleanor. They're not just stealing intellectual property. They're potentially costing lives by delaying and restricting access to this treatment. We need to move quickly, Vivian decided, before Horizon realizes what Westbrook has done. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Armed with the new evidence, Blackwood and Winters filed amended complaints, gave strategic interviews to medical and legal publications, and prepared for the preliminary hearing. As expected, Horizon fought back aggressively. They hired 3 top law firms, filed countersuits against Dr. Chen for alleged violations of her employment contract, and launched a PR campaign portraying her as an unstable, credit-seeking subordinate who had made minor contributions to a team effort. The night before the preliminary hearing, Vivian worked late in her office. The case had consumed her, not just because of its importance, but because it represented everything her firm stood for: protecting innovators, holding powerful entities accountable, ensuring that life-saving discoveries weren't monopolized for profit. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see Eleanor. You should get some rest, her sister said. Tomorrow's a big day. Vivian smiled tiredly. Just reviewing our arguments one more time? Eleanor sat across from her. You know, 2 years ago, I never would have imagined us here. Fighting another corporate giant, with our own firm, our own team. Having second thoughts? Vivian asked. Not for a second, Eleanor replied firmly. This is exactly where we're supposed to be. Vivian reached across the desk and squeezed her sister's hand. Remember when you asked if I had any regrets about leaving Westbrook? You said none. I was right, Vivian said softly. Even with all the challenges, all the late nights, all the threats from people like Reed, I wouldn't trade this for anything. The next morning, the courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, activists, and curious onlookers. The Horizon case had captured public attention, particularly after several cancer patient advocacy groups had joined the fight, highlighting how the company's actions could delay access to a potentially life-saving treatment. As Vivian, Eleanor, and Marcus approached the courthouse with Dr. Chen, a familiar figure appeared at the top of the steps. Maxwell Reed. Miss Blackwood, he called out, his voice carrying over the crowd. A word? Vivian hesitated, then turned to her team. Take Dr. Chen inside. I'll handle this. She approached Reed, maintaining a professional distance. Up close, he looked much as she remembered, impeccably dressed, confident. With that same calculating smile. Mr. Reed, this is unexpected. Is it? Reed replied. You're suing a company where I serve as a board member. A company that, coincidentally, competes directly with one of Nexus's healthcare subsidiaries. Some might call that harassment. Some might call it justice, Vivian countered, especially given the evidence we have. Reed's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. You know, Vivian, I admired your work once, your precision, your ruthlessness. You were a formidable ally. And now? Now you're an inconvenience, one that's becoming increasingly costly to deal with. Is that a threat, Mr. Reed? An observation, he replied smoothly. You've made your point. You've built your little crusading firm. You've gotten your revenge for your sister. But this vendetta has gone far enough. This isn't about you, Reed, Vivian said firmly. It's about Dr. Chen and her life-saving treatment. It's about patients who deserve access to care. It's about right and wrong. Reed laughed, the sound devoid of humor. Right and wrong? The Vivian Blackwood I knew didn't concern herself with such quaint concepts. People change, Vivian replied. Sometimes for the better. Indeed they do, Reed agreed, his tone suddenly serious. Which is why I'm here to offer you a deal. Drop the Horizon case, and I'll ensure that Dr. Chen receives full credit for her work, plus a generous compensation package. Vivian studied him skeptically. Why would you make that offer? Because contrary to what you might believe, I'm not a monster. Chen's treatment has merit, properly developed. It could help millions, and be extremely profitable. And the catch? No catch. Just an end to this unnecessary conflict. You get what your client wants. Horizon avoids a PR disaster, and we all move forward. Vivian considered his words. I'll need to discuss this with my client and my team. Of course, Reed nodded. But don't take too long. Offers like this have expiration dates. Inside the courthouse, Vivian relayed the conversation to Eleanor, Marcus, and Dr. Chen. It's a trap, Eleanor said immediately. Reed doesn't make deals unless they benefit him somehow. I agree, Marcus added. There's something he's not telling us. Dr. Chen, who had remained quiet throughout the exchange, finally spoke. What if the treatment is the real target? What if he wants to acquire it for Nexus? Vivian's eyes widened as the pieces fell into place. That's it. Horizon is struggling financially. Their stock has dropped since our lawsuit went public. They're vulnerable. A hostile takeover, Eleanor realized. Reed wants us to settle quickly so Nexus can swoop in and acquire Horizon, along with your treatment. Dr. Chen's expression hardened. I didn't spend 7 years developing this treatment just to see it become another corporate asset. It needs to be accessible to everyone who needs it, not just those who can afford whatever price Reed decides to set. Then we proceed as planned, Vivian decided. We go to court, we present our evidence, and we fight for full control of the treatment to be returned to Dr. Chen. The preliminary hearing lasted 3 days. Horizon's attorneys, 6 of them against Blackwood, and Winter's 3, fought aggressively, challenging the admissibility of the evidence Westbrook had provided, questioning Dr. Chen's credibility, and attempting to portray the case as a simple employment dispute rather than intellectual property theft. But Vivian, Eleanor, and Marcus were prepared. They presented a compelling narrative backed by irrefutable evidence. They called former Horizon employees who corroborated Dr. Chen's claims. They demonstrated the technical similarities between her original research and Horizon's breakthrough. On the 3rd day, as Vivian delivered her closing argument, she noticed Reed sitting in the back of the courtroom, his expression unreadable. Your Honor, she concluded, this case is about more than intellectual property rights. It's about a life-saving medical treatment being held hostage by corporate greed. Dr. Chen developed this treatment to help cancer patients, not to enrich executives. We ask the court to recognize her rightful ownership and ensure that this treatment reaches those who need it most. The judge's ruling came faster than anyone expected. He granted a preliminary injunction preventing Horizon from further developing or marketing the treatment pending the outcome of the full trial. More significantly, he ordered all research materials returned to Dr. Chen immediately and expressed serious concerns about Horizon's conduct. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around the Blackwood and Winters team. Dr. Chen, what will you do with the treatment now? One asked. Continue development through ethical channels, she replied, and ensure it's accessible to all patients, not just the wealthy. Miss Blackwood, is this personal for you, given your history with Maxwell Reed? Vivian met the reporter's gaze steadily. This case is about Dr. Chen and her groundbreaking work. It's about ensuring that innovations that can save lives aren't hidden away for profit. That's what our firm stands for, and yes, that's personal to me. As the crowd dispersed, Vivian noticed Reed watching from his car across the street. Their eyes met briefly before his driver pulled away. He'll be back, Eleanor said, following her sister's gaze. Men like Reed don't give up easily. Neither do we, Vivian replied. That evening, the team gathered at Eleanor's apartment to celebrate their victory. As champagne flowed and conversation turned from legal strategy to personal stories, Vivian found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. 2 years ago, she had been the fixer, the attorney who made problems disappear for the wealthy and powerful. She had measured success in billable hours and courtroom victories regardless of whether justice was served. Now, she measured success differently. In lives impacted, in wrongs righted, in the knowledge that her skills were being used to protect rather than exploit. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "This isn't over. Mr." Vivian smiled faintly as she put her phone away. Reed was right about one thing. This wasn't over. The fight for justice rarely was. But for the first time in her career, she was on the right side of that fight, and she wouldn't have it any other way. As she rejoined the celebration, Vivian caught Eleanor's eye across the room. Her sister raised her glass in a silent toast, to victory, to purpose, to the bond they had forged through adversity. From estranged siblings to powerful allies, from adversaries to advocates, they had transformed not just their own relationship, but the lives of countless others who now had champions in their corner. And in that transformation, Vivian had discovered what success truly meant. Not power or prestige or perfect records, but purpose. The purpose she had found when she chose her sister over her career, truth over convenience, right over easy. Some decisions change everything. For Vivian Blackwood, the decision to stand by her sister against Maxwell Reed had changed not just her career, but her very soul. And she wouldn't change a thing. As the celebration wound down, Vivian stepped onto Eleanor's balcony for a moment of quiet reflection. The city lights stretched before her, a constellation of human ambition and endeavor. Somewhere in that glittering landscape was the Nexus Tower, where Reed was undoubtedly plotting his next move. Somewhere else was Westbrook and Associates, where her former colleagues continued defending the powerful. And here she stood, transformed by choices she never imagined making. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Reed. "You've chosen your path. Remember that paths have consequences." Eleanor joined her on the balcony, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "Everything okay?" Vivian showed her the message. Reed being Reed. Eleanor's expression darkened. "He doesn't give up, does he?" "No," Vivian agreed. "But neither do we." They stood in companionable silence, sipping their tea and watching the city below. "Do you ever miss it?" Eleanor asked suddenly. "Your old life, the prestige, the luxury." Vivian considered the question. "Sometimes," she admitted, "I miss the simplicity of it, knowing exactly who I was and what was expected of me, never questioning whether what I was doing was right, only whether it was effective. And now, everything is more complicated, more challenging," Vivian smiled, "and infinitely more worthwhile." Eleanor leaned against the railing. "You know, when I found our family 15 years ago, all I wanted was to belong somewhere, to understand where I came from. And now?" Vivian echoed her sister's earlier question. "Now I know that belonging isn't about where you came from. It's about who stands beside you when it matters most." Vivian squeezed her sister's hand. "I'll always stand beside you. I promise." The next morning, Vivian arrived at the office to find Harrison Westbrook waiting in the reception area. "Harrison," she greeted him with surprise. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." "I wanted to congratulate you in person," he replied, rising from his seat. "The preliminary ruling was a significant victory." "We couldn't have done it without your evidence," Vivian acknowledged, leading him to her office. Once the door closed behind them, Westbrook's expression grew serious. "Reed knows." Vivian felt a chill. "About your involvement?" Westbrook nodded. "He called me last night, made it clear that he's aware I provided you with internal Horizon documents." "How did he find out?" "I don't know, but he's threatening to report me to the Bar Association for ethics violations." Vivian studied her former mentor. "Are you worried?" "About being disbarred?" Westbrook gave a small, sad smile. "At this point in my life, not particularly. But Reed rarely stops at professional consequences. He implied there might be other repercussions. For you or for us?" "Both, I suspect." Westbrook hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Reed has been systematically acquiring companies with connections to your past cases, 3 so far." Vivian frowned. "Why would he do that?" "I believe he's building a case against your firm, trying to establish a pattern of personal vendetta rather than legitimate legal advocacy." "That's absurd," Vivian protested. "Our cases are based on merit, not personal grudges." "You and I know that." Westbrook agreed. But Reed is a master of narrative manipulation. He's trying to paint you as obsessed, unethical, using your legal practice to pursue personal vendettas. Vivian absorbed this information, her mind already formulating counter-strategies. Thank you for the warning, Harrison. Consider it partial atonement for the years I spent teaching you to prioritize winning over justice. Westbrook rose to leave. Be careful, Vivian. Reed plays a long game, and he plays to win. After Westbrook departed, Vivian called an emergency meeting with Eleanor and Marcus. She shared Westbrook's warning and Reed's threatening messages. We need to prepare, she concluded. Reed won't stop with threats. He'll take action, and soon. What kind of action? Marcus asked. If I were still the old Vivian, advising Reed on how to destroy an opponent, she met their gazes steadily. I'd look for vulnerabilities in past cases. I'd investigate every client, every witness, every piece of evidence we've ever presented. I'd search for any hint of impropriety or overreach. And then I'd use it to file ethics complaints, malpractice suits, anything to drain our resources and damage our reputation. So we review everything, Eleanor said decisively. Every case, every filing, every strategy. Make sure we're bulletproof. And we prepare for the Horizon trial, Marcus added. That's still our priority. Vivian nodded in agreement. Reed wants us distracted, off balance. We won't give him that satisfaction. The next few weeks were intense. The firm operated on 2 parallel tracks, preparing for the Horizon trial while simultaneously reviewing all their previous cases for potential vulnerabilities. They worked long hours, fueled by determination and the knowledge that they were fighting not just for Dr. Chen, but for the integrity of their firm. Then the attacks began, just as Vivian had predicted. First came the ethics complaint filed with the State Bar Association, alleging that Blackwood and Winters had engaged in a pattern of targeted harassment against specific corporations for personal rather than legal motives. Next came a lawsuit from a former client, claiming malpractice and conflict of interest. The client, a software engineer they had successfully represented in an intellectual property case, suddenly claimed that Vivian had pressured him into filing suit against his former employer to advance her anti-corporate agenda. Then came the media stories, carefully planted pieces questioning the firm's methods and motives. From corporate defender to corporate crusader, the vendetta behind Blackwood and Winters read one particularly damaging headline. Through it all, Vivian maintained her focus on the Horizon case. The trial date was approaching, and Dr. Chen's cancer treatment showed increasingly promising results in independent testing. The stakes were too high to be distracted by Reed's machinations. One evening, as Vivian worked late in her office, Eleanor burst in without knocking. You need to see this, she said, placing her laptop on Vivian's desk. On the screen was an article from a respected legal journal. Whistleblower claims evidence in Horizon case was illegally obtained. Vivian scanned the piece, her stomach tightening. The article quoted an anonymous source claiming that the key evidence against Horizon, the documents Westbrook had provided, had been stolen from company servers by a disgruntled IT employee. This is Reed's work, Vivian said grimly. He's trying to get our evidence thrown out. Can he do that? Eleanor asked. If he can prove the documents were obtained illegally, possibly. Vivian leaned back, thinking. We need to talk to Westbrook, find out exactly how he got those documents. But when Vivian tried to reach Westbrook, his assistant informed her that he had taken an unexpected leave of absence. No further details were available. That's not a coincidence, Marcus observed when Vivian shared the news. Reed got to him somehow. We need a backup plan, Eleanor insisted. Something that doesn't rely on Westbrook's evidence. Vivian nodded slowly, an idea forming. We go back to basics. Dr. Chen's original research. The technical similarities between her work and Horizon's breakthrough. The timeline of events. Even without the internal documents, we can build a compelling circumstantial case. And we find other witnesses, Marcus added. Former Horizon employees who can corroborate Chen's story. They worked through the night, restructuring their case strategy. By morning, they had a new approach, less direct, but potentially just as effective. As they were finalizing their plans, Vivian's assistant interrupted with an urgent message. Harrison Westbrook was at the hospital. He had suffered a heart attack. Vivian rushed to the hospital, finding Westbrook pale but conscious in the cardiac care unit. You shouldn't be here, he said weakly when he saw her. What happened, Harrison? Westbrook closed his eyes briefly. Reed happened. He threatened my family, my grandchildren. Said he would ensure they never worked in this city if I testified about the Horizon documents. Vivian felt a surge of anger. That's witness intimidation. We can report him. No, Westbrook interrupted. No more fighting. I'm done, Vivian. I've withdrawn my statement about the documents. Claimed I was mistaken about their provenance. Harrison, you can't. I've made my choice, he said firmly. Now you need to make yours. Is this case worth the cost? Not just to you, but to everyone around you? Vivian left the hospital with a heavy heart. Reed was escalating, moving beyond legal maneuvers to personal intimidation. The question was, how far would he go? And how far was she willing to go to stop him? Back at the office, she found Eleanor and Marcus waiting anxiously. Westbrook caved, she told them bluntly. Reed threatened his family. Eleanor's expression hardened. So Reed's playing dirty now. He always was, Vivian replied. We just didn't see how dirty until now. What's our next move? Marcus asked. Vivian took a deep breath. I think I need to meet with Reed. One-on-one. Absolutely not, Eleanor protested. It's too dangerous. It's necessary, Vivian countered. This has gone beyond legal battles. Reed has made it personal, and we need to understand exactly what he wants. Despite Eleanor's continued objections, Vivian arranged a meeting with Reed at a neutral location, a public park where they were unlikely to be recognized or overheard. Reed was already seated on a bench when she arrived, looking relaxed and confident in casual attire that probably cost more than most people's formal wear. Vivian, he greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I was pleased to receive your call. Let's skip the pleasantries, she replied, sitting beside him but maintaining distance. You're going after my firm, my colleagues, even Westbrook. I want to know what it will take to end this. Reed chuckled. Direct as always. It's one of the qualities I admired about you. What do you want, Reed? He turned to face her fully. What I've always wanted, to win, to eliminate obstacles to my success. And I'm an obstacle? You and your sister both. Reed's expression hardened. You cost me millions in the settlement with Eleanor. You damaged my reputation. You inspired others to come forward with similar claims. And now you're interfering with Horizon, a company I have significant interest in. The Horizon case isn't about you, Vivian said firmly. It's about Dr. Chen and her life-saving treatment. Everything is about me when it affects my interests, Reed replied coldly. But I'm a reasonable man. I'm willing to offer a compromise. I'm listening. Drop the Horizon case, publicly. State that after further investigation you found insufficient evidence to proceed. In return, I'll end my campaign against your firm. The ethics complaints will disappear. The malpractice suit will be withdrawn. The media stories will stop. Vivian studied him. And Dr. Chen's treatment will be developed by Horizon, with appropriate compensation to Dr. Chen. I'll personally ensure she receives credit for her contribution, but not control of her own invention. That's the compromise, Reed said with a shrug. She gets recognition and money. Horizon gets the treatment. Everyone wins. Except the patients who won't be able to afford the treatment once Horizon prices it. Reed's expression didn't change. Business is business, Vivian. You used to understand that. I used to understand a lot of things differently, she replied quietly. This is my final offer, Reed said, rising from the bench. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, the gloves come off completely. They're already off, Vivian observed. Reed smiled thinly. You have no idea how restrained I've been. For old time's sake. After he left, Vivian remained on the bench, weighing options and consequences. Reed's threat was clear. Things would get worse, much worse, if she didn't comply. But complying meant betraying Dr. Chen, betraying the principles her firm stood for, betraying herself. When she returned to the office, Eleanor and Marcus were waiting anxiously. What did he say? Eleanor demanded. Vivian relayed Reed's ultimatum. We have 48 hours to decide. There's nothing to decide, Eleanor said firmly. We don't cave to threats. Marcus nodded in agreement. If we back down now, we might as well close the firm. Everything we stand for would be meaningless. I agree, Vivian said. But you both need to understand what we're facing. Reed won't stop at legal maneuvers or media smears. He's already threatened Westbrook's family. He could come after all of us, our reputations, our licenses to practice, possibly worse. We knew what we were signing up for when we took on powerful interests, Eleanor reminded her. We can't back down just because the fight got harder. Vivian smiled at her sister's determination. Then, we fight, but we fight smart. Over the next 24 hours, they developed a multi-pronged strategy. First, they would continue preparing for the Horizon trial, focusing on evidence that didn't come from Westbrook. Second, they would document Reed's intimidation tactics and file their own ethics complaints and potentially criminal charges. Third, they would take their story public, not as victims, but as advocates exposing corruption. Reed thinks he can operate in the shadows, Vivian explained. We shine a light on everything he does. As they finalized their plans, Vivian received an unexpected call from Dr. Chen. I need to see you, the scientist said, her voice tense. All of you, tonight. Hours later, Dr. Chen sat in their conference room, visibly nervous. Reed approached me directly, she began without preamble. Offered me $20 million and a research position at Nexus if I drop the case and sign over my treatment rights. Did he threaten you? Vivian asked sharply. Not explicitly, but he made it clear that fighting him would be unpleasant. Doctor. Chen looked at each of them in turn. I wanted to tell you immediately. I'm not taking his offer. It would be understandable if you did, Marcus said gently. $20 million is life-changing money. Dr. Chen shook her head firmly. This treatment could help millions of cancer patients. If Reed controls it, he'll price it out of reach for most of them. I didn't spend 7 years of my life developing this treatment just to see it become another luxury for the wealthy. Vivian felt a surge of admiration for the scientist's integrity. Reed approached me too, threatened to escalate his attacks on our firm if we don't drop your case. And? Dr. Chen asked. And we're not backing down either, Vivian assured her. But things might get ugly. Reed plays dirty, and he has virtually unlimited resources. So do we, Eleanor interjected. Not money, but something more valuable, the truth, and people who believe in it. The next morning, as the 48-hour deadline approached, Vivian made a decision. Instead of calling Reed with their answer, she called a press conference. Standing before a crowd of reporters, with Eleanor, Marcus, and Dr. Chen beside her, Vivian spoke clearly and confidently. 2 years ago, I left a prestigious law firm to start Blackwood and Winters with my sister. We did so because we believed that legal expertise should serve justice, not just those who can afford to buy it. Since then, we have represented innovators, creators, and whistleblowers against powerful interests who sought to exploit or silence them. She paused, making eye contact with several reporters. Recently, our firm has been targeted by a coordinated campaign of legal harassment, media manipulation, and personal intimidation. This campaign has one goal: to force us to abandon our representation of Dr. Lydia Chen in her intellectual property case against Horizon Biotech. Vivian gestured to Dr. Chen, who stepped forward. Dr. Chen developed a groundbreaking cancer treatment that could save countless lives. Horizon stole her work, fired her, and is now attempting to patent and profit from her discovery. When she sought justice, powerful interests aligned against her, including Maxwell Reed, who sits on Horizon's board and has a history of similar behavior. Murmurs rippled through the assembled press as Reed's name was mentioned. Yesterday, Mr. Reed gave us an ultimatum: drop Dr. Chen's case or face escalating attacks on our firm and our people. Today, we're giving our answer publicly. We will not be intimidated. We will not abandon our client. We will not allow life-saving medical treatments to be held hostage by corporate greed. Vivian took a deep breath before delivering her final statement. To Mr. Reed and others who believe that wealth and power place them above accountability, you are wrong. The law exists to protect all people, not just the privileged few. And as long as Blackwood and Winters exists, we will fight to ensure that protection extends to innovators like Dr. Chen, whose work could save millions of lives. The press conference exploded with questions. Cameras flashed as reporters shouted over one another, trying to get Vivian's attention. She answered selectively, maintaining a calm, professional demeanor while making it clear that they had evidence of intimidation and were prepared to file criminal charges if necessary. As they left the podium, Eleanor squeezed her sister's arm. Reed's going to be furious. Good, Vivian replied. Angry people make mistakes. Back at the office, they waited for Reed's response. It came sooner than expected, not through threats or legal maneuvers, but through a press release from Nexus Innovations, announcing the acquisition of a controlling interest in Horizon Biotech. "He's consolidating his position," Marcus observed as they read the announcement. "Now he directly controls Horizon, which means he directly controls Dr. Chen's treatment," Eleanor added grimly. Vivian studied the press release, noting the carefully crafted language about synergies and shared commitment to medical innovation. Between the lines, she read Reed's real message. "I'm more powerful than you thought. This changes our legal strategy," she said finally. "We're no longer just fighting Horizon, we're explicitly fighting Reed and Nexus." "Is that better or worse?" Dr. Chen asked nervously. "Both," Vivian replied. "Worse, because Reed has even more resources than Horizon alone. Better because now the connection is explicit. We can directly address his history of intellectual property theft, including what he did to Eleanor." The trial date was fast approaching. With Reed now openly involved, media interest in the case intensified. Journalists dug into the connections between Reed, Nexus, and Horizon, uncovering a pattern of acquisitions specifically targeting companies with promising intellectual property. 3 days before the trial was set to begin, Vivian received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Miss Blackwood?" a nervous voice asked when she answered. "My name is David Mercer. I was Reed's chief technology officer at Nexus when your sister worked there." Vivian's pulse quickened. "Mr. Mercer, what can I do for you?" "I saw your press conference," he said. "And I've been following the Horizon case. It's happening again, isn't it? What Reed did to your sister." "We believe so, yes." There was a long pause. "I've been carrying this guilt for years. I knew what Reed was doing to Eleanor's work. I helped him do it. I justified it as business, as protecting the company's interests. But watching it happen again with Dr. Chen's cancer treatment, I can't stay silent anymore." "Are you willing to testify, Mr. Mercer?" "Yes," he replied, his voice stronger now. "I have documentation too. Internal communications, development logs, everything that proves Reed deliberately stole Eleanor's algorithm and pushed her out." "Why come forward now?" Vivian asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Because it's not just about software anymore," Mercer said. "It's about a treatment that could save lives, including my sister's. She has the type of cancer Dr. Chen's treatment targets." After arranging to meet Mercer the following day, Vivian shared the development with Eleanor and Marcus. "This could be the breakthrough we need," Marcus said excitedly. "A high-level Nexus executive with direct knowledge of Reed's methods. If he's legitimate," Eleanor cautioned, "this could be another of Reed's traps." "I thought the same thing," Vivian acknowledged, "which is why we'll meet him in a public place and verify his identity and documentation before proceeding." The next morning, Vivian and Eleanor met David Mercer at a busy cafe. He was a thin, nervous man in his 50s, with the pallor of someone who spent most of his time indoors. He brought a laptop and several flash drives. "Everything's here," he said, sliding one drive across the table. Emails between Reed and the executive team about Eleanor's algorithm. Development logs showing how we incorporated her code while obscuring its origins. My own notes from meetings where Reed explicitly directed us to appropriate her work. Vivian inserted the drive into her laptop and began reviewing the files. The evidence was damning, far more comprehensive than what Eleanor had managed to document herself. "Why did you keep all this?" Eleanor asked, studying the man who had helped steal her work. Mercer couldn't meet her eyes. "Insurance, initially. Reed has a habit of discarding people once they've served their purpose. I wanted protection in case he ever turned on me." "And later?" Vivian prompted. "Later it became, I don't know. A record of my complicity. A reminder of what I'd done." He finally looked at Eleanor. "I'm sorry. I knew it was wrong, and I did it anyway." Eleanor was silent for a long moment. "You're making amends now. That counts for something." As they continued reviewing the documents, Vivian noticed Mercer growing increasingly anxious, constantly glancing around the cafe. "Mr. Mercer, is something wrong?" "Reed has people everywhere," he said quietly. "I took precautions coming here, but I can't be certain I wasn't followed." "Are you concerned about retaliation?" Mercer gave a hollow laugh. "Concerned? I'm terrified. Reed doesn't forgive betrayal. But my sister, His voice broke. She deserves a chance at that treatment. They finished the meeting quickly, arranging for Mercer to meet with their full legal team the following day to prepare his testimony. As he left, Vivian noticed a black sedan parked across the street, its windows tinted. "We need to be careful," she told Eleanor. "Reed will do anything to prevent Mercer from testifying. Should we request protection for him? I'll talk to Marcus about it. In the meantime, we need to secure this evidence and prepare to use it at trial." Back at the office, they discovered that Mercer's documentation provided the missing link they needed, a clear pattern showing that Reed's approach to Dr. Chen's treatment was identical to his approach to Eleanor's algorithm. The same methods, the same language and internal communications, even some of the same executives involved in both situations. This isn't just about two isolated incidents anymore, Vivian realized. This is a systematic business practice. Reed identifies valuable intellectual property, acquires it through theft or coercion, and then profits from it while discarding the original creators. A predatory innovation strategy, Eleanor added. He doesn't develop technology, he harvests it. As they prepared to incorporate Mercer's evidence into their case, Vivian received an urgent call from the man himself. "Someone broke into my apartment," he said, his voice shaking. "My computer is gone, along with all my backup drives." "Are you all right?" Vivian asked. "Yes, I wasn't home, but they left a message, a note on my bed that just said, 'Reconsider.'" "Where are you now?" "A hotel. I paid cash. Used a false name." "Stay there," Vivian instructed. "We'll send someone to bring you to a secure location." After arranging for Marcus to pick up Mercer, Vivian called a security firm they had worked with on previous cases. Within hours, they had established a safe house for Mercer and implemented protocols to protect the evidence he had provided. The night before the trial, Vivian worked late in her office, reviewing their opening statement one final time. The case had evolved from a straightforward intellectual property dispute into something much larger, an exposé of Reed's systematic exploitation of innovators, with potentially criminal implications. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. She looked up to see Eleanor at the door, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," her sister said, placing 1 cup on the desk. "Thanks." Vivian rubbed her eyes tiredly. "Just finalizing our strategy." Eleanor sat across from her. "Are you worried?" "About the case?" "No. With Mercer's evidence, we have Reed dead to rights." Vivian took a sip of coffee. "About what Reed might do next?" "Absolutely. He's already tried intimidation, legal harassment, and now breaking and entering," Eleanor mused. "What's left?" "Whatever it takes to win," Vivian replied grimly. "That's always been Reed's philosophy." Eleanor studied her sister's face. "You know him better than anyone. You used to think like him." "I did," Vivian acknowledged, "which is why I know he won't stop. This isn't just business for Reed anymore. It's personal. We've challenged his self-image as untouchable. So what do we do?" "We win," Vivian said simply. "We win so decisively, so publicly, that even Reed can't recover. We create a legal precedent that protects other innovators from his predatory practices. We make this case bigger than just Dr. Chen or Horizon or even Reed himself." Eleanor smiled. "From the fixer to the reformer. Quite a transformation." "I had a good influence," Vivian replied, returning the smile. "A sister who reminded me what integrity looks like." The next morning, the courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, activists, and curious onlookers. The case had captured public attention, particularly after several patient advocacy groups had joined in support of Dr. Chen, highlighting how corporate control of medical innovations often led to restricted access and inflated prices. As Vivian, Eleanor, Marcus, and Dr. Chen approached the courthouse, they spotted Reed arriving with his legal team, 6 attorneys from 3 different prestigious firms, all looking confident and impeccably dressed. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Vivian noticed several familiar faces from the tech industry, medical researchers, and even a few of her former clients. Word had spread that this case represented more than just one scientist's claim against one company. It was a referendum on who controlled innovation in America. The judge entered, and proceedings began. Reed's lead attorney, a polished litigator from Westbrook and Associates, delivered a smooth opening statement portraying Dr. Chen as a disgruntled employee seeking to claim credit for collaborative work. He emphasized Horizon's investments in research and development, its contributions to medical science, and the complexity of modern innovation that rarely stemmed from a single individual. Then it was Vivian's turn. She approached the podium calmly, making eye contact with the judge and then the jury before speaking. Your Honor, members of the jury, this case is about theft, not of physical property, but of ideas, of innovation, of potential life-saving treatments. It's about a systematic practice of identifying brilliant creators, taking their work, and then discarding them while profiting from their genius. She gestured to Dr. Chen. Dr. Lydia Chen spent 7 years developing a revolutionary cancer treatment. She documented every step of her research. She presented her findings to Horizon Biotech, her employer. And 2 weeks after she was terminated, Horizon announced a breakthrough cancer treatment, identical to Dr. Chen's work. Vivian paused, letting the implications sink in. But this isn't an isolated incident. This is a business model, one perfected by Maxwell Reed, who now controls both Nexus Innovations and Horizon Biotech. Mr. Reed has built his fortune not by creating, but by taking. Not by innovating, but by appropriating. Not by collaborating with brilliant minds, but by exploiting them. Reed shifted in his seat, his expression darkening. During this trial, you will hear testimony from former executives who witnessed and participated in this practice. You will see documentation proving that Dr. Chen's work was deliberately stolen. And you will understand that this case is about more than one treatment or one scientist. It's about whether we, as a society, allow the powerful to prey upon innovators with impunity. Vivian concluded her opening statement with a clear, compelling narrative that connected Reed's treatment of Eleanor years ago to his current actions with Dr. Chen and Horizon. By the time she returned to her seat, the energy in the courtroom had shifted. The jury members leaned forward, engaged. The spectators whispered among themselves. And Reed was visibly angry, his jaw clenched, his eyes cold. The first day of trial proceeded with testimony from Dr. Chen, who walked the court through her research process, her documentation, and the striking similarities between her work and Horizon's breakthrough. She remained composed, even under aggressive cross-examination, her scientific precision and evident passion for helping patients, making her a compelling witness. As court adjourned for the day, Vivian received a text message from Marcus, who had left early to check on Mercer at the safe house. Problem: call immediately. Stepping outside, she called Marcus, her stomach tightening with apprehension. Mercer's gone, Marcus said without preamble. Left a note saying he couldn't go through with testifying. The security team says he left voluntarily. No signs of forced entry or struggle. Reed got to him, Vivian said, unsurprised but disappointed. Threatened him or bribed him, or both. What do we do? He was our star witness. Vivian thought quickly. We still have his evidence. Without his testimony, it's hearsay, but we can find other ways to authenticate it. And we have other former Nexus employees who can testify to Reed's methods, even if they weren't as high-ranking as Mercer. Should we report this to the judge? It could be witness tampering. Not without proof, Vivian decided. For now, we adjust our strategy. I'll see you back at the office in an hour. As she ended the call, Vivian noticed Reed watching her from the courthouse steps, a satisfied smile playing at his lips. He knew about Mercer. Of course he did. That evening, the team worked late into the night, restructuring their case to compensate for Mercer's absence. They were deep in discussion when Vivian's phone rang. An unknown number. Miss Blackwood? A woman's voice asked when she answered. This is Angela Mercer, David's sister. Miss Mercer, Vivian replied, putting the call on speaker. Is everything all right? No, Angela's voice trembled. David's in the hospital. He tried to kill himself. Vivian exchanged alarmed glances with Eleanor and Marcus. I'm so sorry. Is he going to be all right? The doctors think so. He left a note. He said he couldn't live with himself anymore, that he was a coward for backing out of testifying. Angela's voice hardened. But I know my brother. He wouldn't do this. Not when my treatment depends on this case. You think someone else was involved? I think Maxwell Reed would do anything to silence him, Angela replied bluntly. And I want to help you stop him. How? David told me everything. I've been his confidant through all of this. His work at Nexus. His knowledge of what Reed did to your sister. his guilt over participating in it. I don't have his technical expertise, but I can testify to what he told me over the years. Vivian considered this. Hearsay testimony has limitations, Miss Mercer. I understand that, but I also have something else. Recordings of our conversations. David was paranoid about Reed. He recorded many of our discussions as a form of insurance in case anything happened to him. This changed everything. Recorded conversations could be admitted as evidence under certain exceptions to the hearsay rule. We need those recordings, Miss Mercer. You'll have them tomorrow morning. And Miss Blackwood, make him pay. Not just for David, but for all the others whose lives he's destroyed in pursuit of profit. The next day in court, Vivian called her first witness, not Angela Mercer, whom they were still preparing, but Eleanor herself. Eleanor took the stand with quiet dignity. She described her work at Nexus, the algorithm she had developed, and the process by which Reed had appropriated it while pushing her out of the company. And how does your experience relate to Dr. Chen's case? Vivian asked. The pattern is identical, Eleanor explained. Identify valuable intellectual property, isolate the creator, appropriate their work, terminate them before the announcement, then claim it was a team effort or internal development. Reed's attorney objected vigorously. Your Honor, Miss Winter's experience at Nexus is entirely irrelevant to this case. It's a transparent attempt to prejudice the jury against Mr. Reed. On the contrary, Vivian countered, it establishes a pattern of behavior that goes directly to intent and absence of mistake. The similarities between these cases are not coincidental. They reflect a deliberate business strategy. The judge allowed the testimony to continue, with limitations. Eleanor remained composed throughout cross-examination, even when Reed's attorneys attempted to portray her as bitter and vindictive. As Eleanor stepped down, Vivian noticed Reed watching her sister with cold calculation. She had seen that look before. Reed was planning something. The day's proceedings continued with technical experts who analyzed the similarities between Dr. Chen's research and Horizon's announced treatment. The evidence was compelling, but without Mercer's testimony, they still lacked the smoking gun that directly connected Reed to the appropriation of Dr. Chen's work. That evening, Angela Mercer arrived at their office with a small digital recorder and several USB drives. Unlike her brother, she showed no signs of nervousness, only determination. A thin woman in her early 50s with a colorful scarf covering her hair loss from chemotherapy, she carried herself with quiet dignity. These are all of David's recordings, she explained, placing the items on the conference table. He's been documenting his concerns about Reed for years. Vivian, Eleanor, and Marcus spent hours reviewing the recordings. David Mercer's voice, often anxious but clear, detailed specific instances of intellectual property theft at Reed's direction. He named executives involved, described methods used to obscure the origins of stolen innovations, and explicitly connected these practices to both Eleanor's algorithm and Dr. Chen's cancer treatment. Most damning was a recorded conversation between Mercer and Reed himself, where Reed casually discussed acquiring Dr. Chen's research before she could create problems by seeking independent development. This is exactly what we needed, Marcus said, his excitement evident. With these recordings, we can establish the direct connection between Reed and the theft of Dr. Chen's work. Are they admissible? Eleanor asked. Don't we need Mercer to authenticate them? Angela can testify to their provenance, Vivian replied. And we can have audio experts verify they haven't been altered. There are hearsay exceptions for statements against interest and unavailable witnesses. Angela, who had been quietly listening to their legal discussion, spoke up. Will this be enough to win the case? It significantly strengthens our position, Vivian assured her. Combined with the technical evidence and the pattern of behavior, these recordings provide the motive and intent that were missing. Good, Angela nodded firmly. Because this isn't just about justice for my brother or Dr. Chen anymore. It's about all the patients who need this treatment, including me. The next morning, as they prepared to present the new evidence, Vivian received an unexpected call from the hospital. David Mercer was awake and asking to speak with her. I'll meet you at the courthouse, she told Eleanor and Marcus. I need to see Mercer first. At the hospital, Vivian found Mercer pale but alert, his wrists bandaged from his suicide attempt. A police officer sat outside his room, standard procedure for suicide attempts. Miss Blackwood, he greeted her weakly. "Thank you for coming. Mr. Mercer, how are you feeling?" "Ashamed," he replied simply. "I let Reed intimidate me again, after promising myself I wouldn't." "What happened?" Mercer's eyes darted nervously to the door. "He sent people to my hotel. They showed me pictures of my sister's house, of her children at school. Said they would experience unfortunate accidents if I testified." His voice broke. "I couldn't risk their safety, but I couldn't live with my cowardice either." "That wasn't cowardice," Vivian said gently. "That was being threatened by a powerful, dangerous man." "My sister brought you the recordings?" Vivian nodded. "They're compelling evidence, but your direct testimony would be even stronger." Mercer was quiet for a moment. "I want to testify. From here, if possible. By video, if the judge will allow it." "Are you sure?" Reed's threats are already in the open. Mercer finished. "Angela has moved her family to a secure location, and I've given a full statement to the police about the threats. It's all documented now." Vivian studied him carefully. "This would be a significant help to our case, but I need to be certain you won't change your mind again, Doctor. Chen, my sister, all the potential patients, they're counting on this evidence." "I won't falter again," Mercer promised. "Some things are worth risking everything for." Vivian arrived at the courthouse, just as proceedings were about to begin. She quickly informed Eleanor and Marcus about Mercer's decision, then approached the judge with a request for video testimony from their hospitalized witness. Reed's attorneys objected strenuously, but after Vivian presented the police report documenting the threats against Mercer and his family, the judge granted the request. Court would reconvene the following day with special arrangements for Mercer's remote testimony. As they left the courtroom, Vivian noticed Reed in deep conversation with his legal team, his expression thunderous. He had not anticipated this development. "He's going to try something else," Eleanor warned as they walked to their car. "Reed doesn't give up when cornered. He escalates." "We'll be ready," Vivian assured her. "We have the evidence. We have Mercer back on board, and we have the truth. Reed can't fight all three." That night, as Vivian worked late in her office preparing for Mercer's testimony, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Harrison Westbrook. "Harrison," she answered, surprised. "How are you feeling?" "Better," he replied, his voice stronger than when she'd last seen him in the hospital. "I've been following the trial coverage. You're doing well. We have strong evidence. And now, Mercer has agreed to testify." "That's actually why I'm calling," Westbrook said, his tone shifting to concern. "Reed knows about Mercer's change of heart." "He's furious, Vivian. More than I've ever seen him." "We expected that. We've taken security precautions." "It may not be enough," Westbrook warned. "I've known Reed for decades. When he's this angry, this threatened, he becomes unpredictable, dangerous." "What are you suggesting?" Westbrook hesitated. "Be vigilant, not just at the courthouse or with Mercer, but everywhere. Reed has resources most people can't imagine, and connections in places you wouldn't expect." After hanging up, Vivian called the security team protecting Mercer to verify all protocols were being followed. She then contacted Angela to ensure her family remained at their secure location. Finally, she called Eleanor. "Where are you?" she asked when her sister answered. "At home, working on tomorrow's technical presentation." "Why?" "Just being cautious. Lock your doors and call me if anything seems off." "You're worried about Reed," Eleanor observed. Westbrook called. "He thinks Reed might be desperate enough to try something extreme." "Like what?" "We're not dealing with a movie villain, Vivian. Reed is a businessman, not a criminal mastermind." "The line between those can blur when billions are at stake," Vivian replied. "Just be careful, okay?" The next morning, the courtroom was filled to capacity as news of Mercer's testimony had spread. Technical staff had set up a secure video link to his hospital room, where he sat propped up in bed, a police officer visible in the background. Vivian began her questioning gently, establishing Mercer's role at Nexus and his direct knowledge of Reed's business practices. As they moved to the specific allegations regarding Dr. Chen's treatment, Mercer's testimony became increasingly damning. "Mr. Reed explicitly directed us to analyze Dr. Chen's research for potential acquisition," Mercer testified. "When I asked if we would be licensing it from her, he laughed and said, 'Why pay for what you can take?' Mercer described meetings where Reed and Horizon executives planned how to appropriate Dr. Chen's work while minimizing legal exposure. He confirmed the authenticity of the recordings Angela had provided, explaining his reasons for documenting these conversations. "I knew what we were doing was wrong," he said, his voice steady despite his obvious weakness. "I participated anyway, out of fear and ambition. But when I learned my sister had the type of cancer Dr. Chen's treatment targets, I couldn't remain silent anymore." Throughout the testimony, Reed sat stone-faced, occasionally whispering to his attorneys. The jury members watched intently, several taking notes as Mercer methodically connected Reed to the systematic theft of intellectual property. When Reed's attorney rose for cross-examination, his approach was aggressive, attempting to portray Mercer as unstable, vindictive, and unreliable. "Mr. Mercer, you're testifying from a hospital bed after attempting suicide. Would you describe yourself as emotionally stable?" "Objection," Vivian called out, badgering the witness and irrelevant. "Sustained," the judge ruled. "Counsel, focus on the substance of the testimony, not the witness's medical condition." The attorney shifted tactics, questioning Mercer's motives and suggesting he had fabricated evidence to harm Reed out of personal animosity. But Mercer remained composed, acknowledging his own complicity while standing firm on the facts of his testimony. By the time cross-examination concluded, Mercer appeared exhausted but resolute. The judge called a recess until the following morning, when closing arguments would begin. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around Vivian, Eleanor, and Marcus. "Miss Blackwood, how would you characterize today's testimony?" Mr. Mercer provided a clear, factual account of how Maxwell Reed and Horizon Biotech systematically appropriated Dr. Chen's work. Vivian replied. His testimony, combined with the technical evidence and documented pattern of behavior, presents a compelling case for intellectual property theft on a massive scale. Do you believe the jury will rule in your favor? I believe in the justice system's ability to recognize truth when presented with clear evidence, Vivian said diplomatically, and the truth in this case is undeniable. As the press conference concluded, Vivian noticed Reed watching from his car across the street. Their eyes met briefly, and she was struck by the cold calculation in his gaze. Not anger, not fear, but something more dangerous, the look of a man making final preparations. That evening, as the legal team gathered at their office to prepare closing arguments, Vivian received an urgent call from the hospital. Mercer had suffered a sudden medical emergency, cardiac arrest. Doctors were working to stabilize him. "This isn't a coincidence," Eleanor said when Vivian shared the news. "Reed found a way to get to him, even in the hospital." "We can't prove that," Marcus cautioned. "Mercer was already in fragile health." "We don't need to prove it," Vivian replied. "His testimony is already on record." Even if she couldn't finish the sentence. An hour later, the hospital called again. Despite their best efforts, David Mercer had died. The official cause was listed as cardiac arrest, but given the circumstances, the police were investigating. The news hit the team hard. Angela Mercer, who had been working with them on final preparations, collapsed in tears. Eleanor comforted her, while Vivian stepped outside to process what had happened. Her phone rang. Reed. "A tragedy about Mercer," he said without preamble, his voice smooth and controlled. "Stress can be deadly, especially for someone in his condition." "You did this," Vivian replied, her voice low and tight. "Careful, counselor. That's a serious accusation without evidence, and we both know how important evidence is in a court of law." "Why are you calling, Reed?" "To offer one last chance at a reasonable resolution. Drop the case. Issue a statement citing insufficient evidence following Mercer's unfortunate passing. In return, I'll ensure Dr. Chen receives generous compensation and credit as a contributing researcher." "Never," Vivian said firmly. "Mercer's testimony is already on record. His death doesn't change that." "But it does change the narrative," Reed countered. "Now it's the desperate claims of a mentally unstable man who took his own life. Hardly compelling to a jury." "You underestimate the power of truth, Reed. Even when the messenger is gone, the message remains." "Such idealism," Reed chuckled. "I remember when you were more pragmatic. When you understood that power and resources determine outcomes, not abstract concepts like truth or justice." "I was wrong then," Vivian replied simply. "And you're wrong now. This ends tomorrow, in court, where even you can't control the outcome." After hanging up, Vivian rejoined her team. They worked through the night, adjusting their closing argument to address Mercer's death while emphasizing the strength of his testimony and the corroborating evidence. The next morning, news of Mercer's death had spread. The courthouse was surrounded by protesters holding signs with messages like "Justice for Mercer" and "Stop Corporate Theft." Inside, the atmosphere was tense as the judge called the court to order. "Before we proceed with closing arguments," the judge began, "I want to acknowledge the passing of witness David Mercer. While the timing raises questions that are being investigated separately, his testimony remains part of the court record and will be considered by the jury in their deliberations." Reed's attorney delivered his closing argument first, attempting to discredit Mercer's testimony as the unreliable claims of a troubled man. He emphasized Horizon's legitimate research activities and portrayed Dr. Chen as an employee attempting to claim credit for collaborative work. Then it was Vivian's turn. She approached the podium slowly, making eye contact with each jury member before beginning. "Yesterday, David Mercer testified to this court about Maxwell Reed's systematic practice of stealing intellectual property. Today, David Mercer is dead. The timing is, at minimum, suspicious. But even in death, Mr. Mercer's truth remains powerful." She walked the jury through the evidence, the technical similarities between Dr. Chen's research and Horizon's breakthrough, the documented pattern of behavior connecting Eleanor's case to Dr. Chen's, the recordings where Reed explicitly discussed appropriating innovations rather than properly acquiring them. "This case is about more than one treatment or one scientist," Vivian continued. "It's about whether we, as a society, allow the powerful to prey upon innovators with impunity. It's about whether life-saving medical treatments belong to those who create them or those who steal them. It's about justice, not just for Dr. Chen, but for every creator whose work has been taken without credit or compensation." She concluded by addressing Mercer's death directly. "David Mercer died after telling the truth about Maxwell Reed and Horizon Biotech. We may never know with certainty whether his death was natural or engineered. But we do know this. He sacrificed everything to ensure that Dr. Chen's cancer treatment would reach the patients who need it, including his own sister. The question now is whether his sacrifice will have meaning, whether truth and justice can prevail against wealth and power." As Vivian returned to her seat, the courtroom was silent. Even Reed's expression had shifted from confidence to concern. The jury members watched him with new scrutiny, as if seeing him differently after Vivian's words. The judge instructed the jury on the relevant laws and sent them to deliberate. Most expected days of discussion given the case's complexity, but just 4 hours later, they returned with a verdict. "On the claim of intellectual property theft, we find in favor of the plaintiff, Dr. Lydia Chen. On the claim of wrongful termination, we find in favor of the plaintiff, Dr. Lydia Chen. On the claim of breach of contract, we find in favor of the plaintiff, Dr. Lydia Chen." The jury awarded Dr. Chen full ownership of her cancer treatment, $75 million in compensatory damages, and an unprecedented $500 million in punitive damages against Horizon Biotech and Maxwell Reed personally. The courtroom erupted. Dr. Chen embraced Vivian, tears streaming down her face. Eleanor and Marcus celebrated with the rest of their team. Angela Mercer closed her eyes, whispering a quiet thank you to her brother. Reed sat motionless, his face a mask of controlled rage. When his attorneys leaned in to discuss appeal options, he waved them away and walked out of the courtroom alone. Outside, reporters surrounded the Blackwood and Winters team. "This verdict sends a clear message," Vivian told them. "No one, regardless of wealth or power, is above accountability. Dr. Chen's treatment will now be developed as she intended, with accessibility as a priority, not profit." "What about David Mercer?" a reporter called out. "Do you believe his death was connected to his testimony?" "I believe David Mercer died after courageously telling the truth," Vivian replied carefully. "The investigation into the circumstances of his death is ongoing, and we will cooperate fully with authorities." As the press conference concluded, Vivian noticed Harrison Westbrook standing at the edge of the crowd. He gave her a small nod of acknowledgement, perhaps approval, perhaps respect. That evening, the team gathered at Eleanor's apartment to celebrate their victory. The mood was bittersweet. triumph tempered by Mercer's death, and the knowledge that Reed, though defeated in court, remained dangerous. "What happens now?" Dr. Chen asked as they shared a toast. "Reed will appeal, won't he?" "Almost certainly," Vivian confirmed. "But appeals take time, and the evidence is strong. Meanwhile, you have legal control of your treatment. You can begin development through whatever channels you choose." "I've already been contacted by several nonprofit research institutions," Dr. Chen said. "They're willing to help develop and distribute the treatment at minimal cost to patients." "That's what David would have wanted," Angela added quietly. "His sister's legacy." As the celebration continued, Vivian stepped onto the balcony for a moment of quiet reflection. The city lights stretched before her, a constellation of human ambition and endeavor. Somewhere in that glittering landscape, Reed was planning his next move. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Eleanor joined her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "You should be celebrating," she said, offering one to Vivian. "This is what we built Blackwood and Winters for." Vivian accepted the glass with a smile. "I am celebrating, just processing everything too." "Mercer?" "Partly." Vivian sipped her champagne. "And Reed." "This isn't over, Eleanor. He's not the type to accept defeat, especially such a public one." "I know," Eleanor acknowledged. "But whatever comes next, we'll face it together. That's what we do now." They stood in companionable silence, watching the city below. After a moment, Eleanor spoke again. "You know, when I found our family all those years ago, I was looking for connection, for roots. I never imagined we'd end up here, partners, fighting for justice, changing lives." "Life takes unexpected turns," Vivian replied softly. 2 years ago, I was the fixer, helping the powerful escape consequences. Now, I'm a hero," Eleanor finished. "To Dr. Chen, to Angela Mercer, to all the innovators who now have hope that their work can't be stolen with impunity." Vivian shook her head. "Not a hero, just someone who finally found the courage to do what's right." Their moment of reflection was interrupted by Marcus, who stepped onto the balcony with an urgent expression. "You need to see this," he said, holding out his tablet. On the screen was a breaking news alert. Maxwell Reed resigns as CEO of Nexus Innovations, following landmark verdict. "That's unexpected," Eleanor remarked. "Reed doesn't surrender power willingly." "It's not surrender," Vivian said, reading further. "It's strategic. Listen to his statement. I am stepping down temporarily to focus on appealing this miscarriage of justice." The verdict against Horizon Biotech was based on the testimony of a disturbed individual and represents a dangerous precedent for American innovation. "He's positioning himself as the victim," Marcus observed. "And distancing Nexus from the fallout," Vivian added. "Classic Reed, protect the empire at all costs." The celebration continued inside, but Vivian's mind was already working through the implications of Reed's move and preparing for the battles ahead. The victory was significant, but it was just one step in a longer journey toward accountability. 3 days later, as the media coverage of the verdict began to fade, Vivian received a call from Detective James Morrison of the Major Crimes Unit. "Miss Blackwood, we've been investigating David Mercer's death," he began. "The initial autopsy showed cardiac arrest, but further testing revealed traces of a compound that can induce heart failure while appearing natural." Vivian's grip tightened on the phone. "You're saying he was murdered?" "We're saying it's now a homicide investigation," Morrison corrected carefully. "Given the circumstances and timing, we're looking closely at anyone who benefited from silencing his testimony." "Maxwell Reed," Vivian said. "Among others," the detective acknowledged. "We'd like to interview you and your team about any threats or unusual incidents leading up to Mercer's testimony." Vivian agreed to the interviews, then called Eleanor and Marcus to inform them of the development. They weren't surprised. All had suspected foul play, but the confirmation was still chilling. "If they can prove Reed was involved," Eleanor began. "That's a big if," Vivian cautioned. "Reed is too smart to leave a direct connection. He would have used intermediaries, probably several layers removed." "So, he gets away with murder?" Marcus asked, frustration evident in his voice. "Not necessarily," Vivian replied. "This investigation changes things. Even if they can't directly connect Reed to Mercer's death, the publicity alone will damage him. Investors, board members, partners, they'll all be watching closely. Over the following weeks, the homicide investigation dominated business news. Nexus stock dropped as investors grew nervous about potential criminal implications for the company. Reed, though officially on leave, issued statements maintaining his innocence and decrying a witch hunt against successful entrepreneurs. Meanwhile, Dr. Chen moved forward with developing her cancer treatment. True to her word, she partnered with nonprofit research institutions to ensure the treatment would be accessible to all patients, regardless of financial means. Early clinical trials showed promising results, particularly for patients like Angela Mercer, who had not responded to conventional therapies. Blackwood and Winters received a flood of new cases. Innovators, creators, and whistleblowers inspired by Dr. Chen's victory to seek justice for their own intellectual property claims. The firm expanded, hiring additional attorneys and support staff to handle the increased workload. 6 weeks after the verdict, as Vivian was preparing for a new case, her assistant interrupted with an urgent message. Harrison Westbrook was in the reception area, asking to see her. Harrison, Vivian greeted him, noting that he looked better than when she'd last seen him, still frail, but with more color in his face. "This is unexpected." "I won't take much of your time," Westbrook said, as he settled into a chair in her office. "I came to share some information that might interest you." "About Reed?" Westbrook nodded. The board of Nexus Innovations has voted to make his temporary resignation permanent. They're distancing themselves from him as quickly and quietly as possible. "Because of the murder investigation?" "Partly," Westbrook acknowledged, "but there's more." After the verdict, several other former employees came forward with similar stories of intellectual property theft. The board commissioned an internal investigation and found a pattern dating back years, dozens of cases where innovations were appropriated without proper credit or compensation. Vivian leaned forward, intrigued. "And they're cutting Reed loose to protect the company." "Exactly. There's talk of a global settlement, a fund to compensate all the innovators whose work was stolen, including retroactive patent sharing and public acknowledgement." "That's significant," Vivian said, processing the implications. "A systemic acknowledgement of wrongdoing, not just in isolated cases." "Your case broke the dam," Westbrook said with a small smile. "Dr. Chen's victory gave others the courage to come forward, and now Reed is facing the consequences of years of predatory practices." "What about the murder investigation?" Westbrook's expression grew serious. "That's actually the other reason I'm here. The police interviewed me yesterday about my knowledge of Reed's methods and connections. I told them everything I know, including about certain consultants Reed has used in the past for problem solving." "You're cooperating with the investigation against Reed?" Vivian couldn't hide her surprise. "I'm cooperating with justice," Westbrook corrected, "something I should have done years ago." He rose to leave. "You've built something remarkable here, Vivian, something that matters. I wanted you to know that some of us from the old world are watching and learning." After Westbrook left, Vivian sat at her desk, reflecting on how completely her life had transformed in just 2 years, from defending the powerful to holding them accountable, from measuring success in billable hours to measuring it in lives changed and justice served. Her phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Turn on the news, now." Vivian switched on the office television to see breaking news banners across the screen. Tech billionaire Maxwell Reed arrested in connection with murder of former executive. The report showed Reed being led from his penthouse in handcuffs, his face a mask of controlled rage as reporters shouted questions. According to the news anchor, police had discovered financial transactions linking Reed to a known fixer who specialized in making problems disappear. The same individual had been captured on hospital security footage near Mercer's room shortly before his death. Vivian watched in stunned silence as the empire Reed had built through theft and intimidation began to crumble in real time. The man who had seemed untouchable was now facing not just civil penalties but potential criminal charges for murder. Eleanor burst into her office, eyes wide. "They actually got him. I never thought." "Neither did I," Vivian admitted. "Reed was always too careful, too insulated." "Pride comes before a fall," Eleanor quoted softly. "He believed himself untouchable, above consequences. That arrogance finally caught up with him." The news continued to unfold throughout the day. Former associates distanced themselves from Reed. Business partners issued statements expressing shock and dismay. The Nexus Board announced a complete leadership overhaul and full cooperation with authorities. That evening, as Vivian was preparing to leave the office, she received an unexpected visitor, Angela Mercer. "I had to come in person," Angela said, embracing Vivian tightly, "to thank you for everything. David would be. He would be so proud to see Reed finally facing justice." "How are you feeling?" Vivian asked, noting that Angela looked stronger than when they'd last met. "The treatment is working," Angela replied with a smile. "Dr. Chen's protocol, it's shrinking the tumors. The doctors are cautiously optimistic." "That's wonderful news." "It's David's legacy," Angela said, emotion evident in her voice. "He died bringing the truth to light, making sure this treatment would be available to patients like me. I won't waste the chance he gave me." After Angela left, Vivian found herself alone in the quiet office. She walked to the window, looking out at the city as dusk settled over the skyline. So much had changed. Reed's arrest, Dr. Chen's treatment saving lives, Nexus acknowledging years of intellectual property theft, and at the center of it all, a decision Vivian had made 2 years ago, to stand by her sister, to choose right over easy, to use her legal skills for justice rather than profit. Her phone rang. Eleanor again. "Are you still at the office?" her sister asked. "Just leaving." "Why?" "Come to my place. Marcus is here and Dr. Chen is joining us. This day calls for a celebration." An hour later, Vivian sat in Eleanor's living room, surrounded by the people who had become not just colleagues, but family. They raised glasses in a toast. To justice, to David Mercer's memory, to the patients whose lives would be saved by Dr. Chen's treatment. "I've been thinking, Doctor," Chen said as the conversation flowed, "about naming the treatment protocol. I'd like to call it the Mercer-Chen protocol, to honor David's sacrifice." "He would be honored," Angela replied, tears in her eyes. As the evening progressed, Vivian found herself on Eleanor's balcony once again, looking out at the city lights. So much had changed in 2 years. Her career, her priorities, her understanding of success. She had lost the prestige of Westbrook and Associates, the luxury of her former lifestyle, the simplicity of never questioning whether what she did was right. But she had gained something far more valuable: purpose, integrity, and a family built on shared values rather than shared DNA. Eleanor joined her on the balcony, as she had so many times before. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "I was just thinking about choices," Vivian replied. "How one decision can change everything." "Your decision to represent me instead of Reed. That was the beginning," Vivian nodded. "But every day since has been a choice too, to build something meaningful, to fight for what's right even when it's difficult." "Any regrets?" Eleanor asked, echoing a question she had asked many times over the past 2 years. Vivian smiled, watching the celebration continue inside. Marcus and Dr. Chen deep in conversation, Angela showing photos of her children, the team that had become a family. "None," she said simply. "Not a single one." The sisters stood together in comfortable silence, united by blood but bound more strongly by choice. The choice to stand together against power and corruption, to use their talents for justice, to build something that mattered. In the distance, the lights of the city twinkled like stars, a reminder of all the lives touched by their work, all the innovators who now had champions in their corner, all the patients who would benefit from treatments developed with integrity rather than profit as the primary motive. 1 year later, Blackwood and Winters had grown into one of the most respected intellectual property and whistleblower protection firms in the country. Their offices now occupied an entire floor of a downtown building, with a team of 15 attorneys and support staff dedicated to protecting innovators and holding powerful interests accountable. Maxwell Reed's trial had concluded with a conviction for second-degree murder in David Mercer's death. The man who had once commanded boardrooms and shaped industries now faced 20 years in prison. His empire had crumbled, with Nexus and Horizon both under new leadership committed to ethical innovation practices. Dr. Chen's cancer treatment, officially named the Mercer-Chen protocol, had received expedited FDA approval after showing remarkable results in clinical trials. True to her word, Dr. Chen had ensured the treatment remained accessible to all patients, regardless of financial means, through innovative licensing agreements with nonprofit healthcare providers. Angela Mercer, now in remission, had established the David Mercer Foundation to support whistleblowers who risked their careers and safety to expose corporate wrongdoing. Blackwood and Winters provided pro bono legal services to the foundation's beneficiaries. On the anniversary of their victory against Reed, Vivian stood at a podium accepting the Public Justice Award for the firm's work in the Chen case and subsequent intellectual property protections. Eleanor, Marcus, and the entire team watched proudly as she addressed the audience of legal professionals, activists, and journalists. 2 years ago, I left a prestigious law firm to represent my sister against a powerful man who had stolen her work. Vivian began. That decision? To choose family over career, justice over convenience, right over easy, transformed not just my professional life, but my understanding of what success truly means. She gestured to her team seated in the front row. Success isn't measured in billable hours or victory records. It's measured in lives changed, in wrongs righted, in systems improved. It's measured in the courage to stand against power when power is wrong, to speak truth when truth is inconvenient, to choose the difficult right over the easy wrong. Vivian paused, making eye contact with Eleanor before continuing. The law is a powerful tool. It can protect the vulnerable or shield the powerful from consequences. It can right wrongs or perpetuate them. The choice of how we use that tool defines us as attorneys and as human beings. As applause filled the room, Vivian reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the fixer, who helped the powerful escape justice, to an advocate who held them accountable. From a woman who measured success and victories at any cost, to one who measured it in positive impact on the world. Some decisions change everything. For Vivian Blackwood, the decision to stand by her sister against Maxwell Reed had changed not just her career, but her very soul, and she wouldn't change a thing. Don't just leave inspired, act. Hit that subscribe button, because stories like this disappear fast, and the next one will be darker, deeper, and closer than you expect.